At the same time he shot out a murderous spirit. It was a more refined intent to kill than anyone else had in the underworld. An energy that kept saying that he would kill you was like a silent lion's roar that made people unable to move an inch. In reality, the crazy mage's face began to change into a bright red tomato. If you want to kill me, it would be better to kill me fast. Or else I will poke out your eyes, feast on your heart, and burn your corpse to crisp someday. It was like a frantic effort. However, there was still quite a bit of malice. There would only be a few novices that could receive and withstand Muyang's murderous spirit close up. Of course, if he was to really release his murderous spirit, their bodies would burst. Nevertheless, while it was quite good, he didn't like it. Why did you come out already? Being Merlin's successor meant that the person needed to stay at the Blue Temple until he was ready. No matter how great of a talent you had, 1 year was absurd. He ran away. Merlin wouldn't have been easy with his training, and he would have run from the Blue Temple because he was sick of it. Well, what? Gulk. Muyang held his neck and raised it. The man struggled as he shivered his whole body before he flipped his eyes. Muyang's eyes were filled with silent anger. Merlin's successor. This title was enough to produce a disturbance in the underworld. The Great Magician was a title for those who could kill a demon king, and even demon gods depending on their skills. He had thrown that away. Before that hope was completed, he ran out as a defective product. How could he not be furious? He would have just died before he realized that he had received an undeserving blessing. If this arena had still been occupied by the Command Clan and not Muyang, this man would have become a good material to make juncture with. Plump. Muyang frowned as he threw the man on the floor. Cough. Cough. Listen carefully. Either way, he was a man who learned magic from Merlin. A man who learned authentic magic, and not skills used by people. If he could let him live and use him, he would become quite useful. Then as he looked around his surrounding, few thousands of eyes watched Muyang. This place is the underworld. Beginners. What could they know? Even more, the current situation was the worst for them. As soon as they came out, they were once again put into a war. Muyang looked at the sky of the arena. Soon, wyverns made up of bone flew up and started to break the barrier spell placed on the arena and enter the arena. Swoosh. Muyang took out anguish. And he spoke. This place is a battlefield. The followers of the Sky Devil had all sorts of different skills. Besides the skills given by the Sky Devil, they also had the skills they already had. Muyang couldn't predict all of their skills. Only because he thought of the worst-case scenario, he had already predicted the magical barrier of the arena would break soon. And so, around 500 were attacking from the air, the rest started to attack from the ground. However, the members of the Sun Guild and Muyang were tired of fighting. The beginners were frozen as they couldn't help but to just watch a fight between gods. Is he the same person? They say one thing after another. Fuck. Who are these people? The monsters in the Blue Temple were nothing. Amazement, shock, and deep sighs. The feeling each of them felt was different, but they were all unable to take their eyes off. A month was difficult at the Blue Temple. The monsters invaded every day and the lacked food supply. But the current battle was so dynamic that they didn't feel their days at the Blue Temple were nothing. The fighting style of Muyang was especially desperate. It was very aggressive with no backing up. At the very front, he destroyed the enemy's front line and made away. If he succeeded, he could reduce the damage to a minimum and annihilate the enemy, but if he was to fail, it was a tactic that would only lead to a useless death. Something that no one else could easily do. He had succeeded. Not just that. Monster. He was able to control death. The ones who were killed by him rose as undead. If there was someone who was more of a monster than a monster, it was him. Muyang hid his powers because of his position as the commander-in-chief of the Sun Guild. But after the Sky Devil trial started and when Lennon disappeared, he exhibited his powers. However, surprisingly no one reacted. It had been a disputed question from some time that he could control specters. They acted as though there wasn't anything particularly strange for him to have a skill like that because he had so many skills. A strong blood scent surrounded the place. Corpses were lined up in rows and there was no hesitation in killing a human. Ashura. The underworld was that sort of place. I need to live. In this sort of world? I have to kill to live. What if they kill us? However, it was a shock to them. It couldn't be helped. They thought everything would end when they get out of the Blue Temple. However, that was only the start. They just only finished their beginner's training. Especially Oscar was greatly shocked. Merlin's words were true. He said there were many strong men. However, Oscar considered himself the strongest. As there were no enemies in the Blue Temple, it was an obvious matter. Oscar felt like he became an absolute master and life was so dull when he was trapped in the Blue Temple. As Merlin wasn't human, Oscar wanted to win against other strong humans. He was self-satisfied. He became small. In this place, Oscar wasn't anything. In their eyes, Oscar was just one of many beginners. However, he was unsure who was the devil. If any of the two wanted to kill them as beginners, they wouldn't have any way to stop them. At last, Muyang, who cut off the last follower's neck, pulled Anguish back. Then the blood on Anguish was absorbed by Muyang. Devil. If there was a devil among them, it had to be that guy. Muyang's image made it seem so. A man who tramples and kills humans like ants and gave off a vicious energy. Oscar was certain as he repeated a spell. He thought he needed to do something first before Muyang killed him. Die. Water and wind, earth and fire and golden energy were merged together into one. It was the strongest magic Oscar could currently use. Even a devil wouldn't be safe after receiving this blow. Spat. A blue sphere with the energy of 5 elements flew towards Muyang. Then Muyang slowly turned around. He raised Anguish and within a blink of an eye he cut through the blue sphere. From the moment the energies were gathered, Muyang was aware of it. It was a strong wave of magical power than he had expected, but that was all. Seeing Muyang's actions that flowed naturally like water, Oscar opened his mouth wide. They say a stick is the medicine for a mad dog. Then Muyang placed Anguish back. He didn't kill him. Merlin's successor. Even if he only learned for a year, he was someone who could use authentic magic. It meant that his skills were quite good as well and would be of help in improving his territory. Of course, even if they had skills, it was normal for Muyang to instantly kill them when some attacked him. If he wasn't the successor of Merlin, the one who devoted himself to the humanity and tried to stop demon gods until the end, Muyang would have done so. It seemed necessary for Muyang to fix his state of mind. I'm fucked. Oscar instinctively felt what was going to happen from now on. And a moment later, Muyang had become a devil itself to Oscar. Hyacinth's eyes were dreamy. After finding out a fairy followed Muyang, she trusted him more. Now it didn't matter if he was a knight or not. Just by knowing Muyang, her heart fluttered. Fairies only followed true heroes. So Muyang was a hero. Even him hitting people is cool. And so she was blinded by love. Although everyone else clicked their tongue when they saw Oscar get beaten by Muyang, not Hyacinth. Even him getting blood on his fist is cool. Even when Muyang's fists were covered in blood and Oscar's whole body became a rag, Hyacinth looked at Muyang breathing with loving eyes. Even in the underworld there was love. Especially for a girl, those emotions can't be killed. And for Hyacinth, she was in her prime. If just one message didn't pop up. The guild master of the Sun Guild, Alexandro Quintart, has died. Hyacinth's eyes greatly widened. What the hell was that about? When a human who is close to a hero dies, everyone was sent this sort of message. They weren't sure if this truth was told so that people could be more hopeless or for them to work harder. But just by his influence, Alexandro Quintart was someone who was greater than a hero. His death was, of course, told to everyone and it approached them as something greater than a shock. But Hyacinth plumped down on the ground. The color of her face changed to blue. The guild master is? No way. It has to be a lie. The Sun Guild was also freaking out. Even to a normal guild member, Alexandro Quintart was a myth. The person who rose to the top from the very bottom. A man who didn't seem like he would die even if he was killed. And so even when he disappeared, there was an implicit trust that he would return. It was also the reason he wanted to quickly take care of the situation with Lenin. Since it was obvious that the leadership would be taken by Alexandro when he returned, Muyang planned to take some of the authority beforehand. But he died. The future has changed. Muyang also couldn't help but harden his expression. Alexandro Quintart was originally a figure who survived until the very end. One of the top 10 humans. He was so proficient in working behind the scenes that he utilized the forest of death the most. It wasn't possible for him to already depart this world. Something went wrong. And as a result he died. Alexandro definitely had a plan. He purposely hid himself and waited for the last blow. But that should have happened. From where and who? Muyang's eyes glowed once. Asterisk. Taken took back his sword. And held the arm that was dropped and once again placed it on the injured part. This humble servant has taken down a traitor. Soon a purple light was created and the arm was put back together. On the other hand, the corpse didn't answer. Alexandro Quintart fell to the ground after spitting out a handful of blood. This was the underground capital. A secret place that was connected to the Sky Library. However, the surrounding place was destroyed. Through Taken and Alexandro Quintart's fight, the terrain had changed. You are strong. Taken acknowledged him. If he wasn't careful he would have been killed himself. How was Taken in this underground capital? Moon currently couldn't leave the Sky Library. So he ordered Taken to kill him. Now the fruit has come to bear. The specters and the Sky Demon's strength were well matched. This might also have been the reason why Azura and the Sky Demon had similar tendencies. As if that wasn't enough, he earned a new sword. The Lunatic Killer's sword, that gave off a black energy. A sword whose abilities depended on the user. The closer they were to death, its abilities greatly increased, and as Taken used it, it instantly became an S rank. Thanks to this, Taken was able to grab hold of powers close to those of a transcendental being. If someone other than Taken arrived at this place, they wouldn't have been able to kill Alexandro. Then Taken grabbed a mirror that fell nearby. The Sun Mirror. It was the Sun Guild's godly object. The only item Alexandro took. When Taken saw it he couldn't help but be zoned out for a moment. He felt like his soul was being sucked in. He couldn't even let out a scream. He felt like he was wandering around inside of it for a long time. However, in the end he returned. There was no change in his outer appearance. His spirit was also similar. But then Taken hid the sun mirror within his cape. He didn't know why he did it. He didn't even sense it. He instinctively hid the mirror and forgot about it. Next target is the arena. The Sky Devil wants it reclaimed. As if nothing had happened, Taken moved. 1,000 Jiangshis followed behind him. Hyung Bish continued to perform his duties for the command clan. In reality, however, he was acting as a secret informant after destroying the hexagrams and infiltrating the Sky Library. Although he was an undead, he was highly utilizable because it was Muyang who made him. As long as he doesn't get noticed by Moon, who would smell Azura's scent, he would be able to sow even greater chaos. Hyung Bishnim, did you hear? Alexandro has died. Sheet. We are the ones who are loyal, but why would he give such an important mission to that guy? Shouldn't we do something? I think it would be difficult to gain any more contribution even if we stay here. Hyung Bish was strong power within the command clan. Of course, there were a lot of people who followed him. However, he was now just an undead after losing to Muyang. Hyung Bish shook his head. If he left the Sky Library, he would be unable to send Muyang information in real time. In this type of situation, time was of the essence. Information was also the same. It's important to protect this place. As Hyung Bish spoke as if he squeezed his voice out, the surrounding mood quickly became gloomy. If you wanted an even greater blessing of the Sky Devil, you needed to contribute. However, they would lack it just by protecting the Sky Library. Did Moon not say anything? No. Atukanim and Runapapanim have already left the Sky Library. Now, when Alexandro's death is confirmed, they say it's the best time to destroy the Sun Guild. It seems like Taken will also soon head to the arena. Tuka and Runapapa did. Like Hyung Bish, the two were both super strong within the Command Clan. Two of the three most influential people left the Sky Library. Additionally, Taken would join. It was already a level past overkill. More than half of the soldiers stationed at the Sky Library were now focused on one place. The new devoted were slowly gathering. Even powerful specters and jiangshis. They numbered roughly 50,000. On the other hand, the Sun Guild only had about 14,000 people left. There were also the beginners, but it was hard to say they would be of great help. Muyang, who was within Hyung Bish's conscience inwardly, was concerned about it. If he could just delay the time even for a bit. We will also join them. Since this happened, there was only a muddy fight left. Asterisk. There are only 541 hours left. The number of survivors 385,598. The rank of targets for elimination will be shown. First priority target for elimination 15,000 points. Hyacinth. Second priority target 10,000 points. Bahamut. Third priority target 5,000 points. Itsuki Yuka. Fourth priority target 3,000 points. Muyang. The locations the top 5 people will be shown to devotees. In addition, you will receive specters attack more violently. If you die, that soul will also belong to the Sky Devil. The Sky Devil makes an offer. Will you become a devotee? If you accept, you can receive the Sky Devil sword. Yes. Lawless Jean disappeared from the rankings. Instead, Muyang went up the ranks. Also, the Sky Devil bet an S-rank weapon on Muyang. He couldn't help but grin. By comparing with Hyacinth, it seemed like the Sky Devil only made these offerings to Muyang. The one with the least faith. To the Sky Devil, I'm a dagger and poison. Even if the Sky Devil was a real god, Muyang would still ignore him. Muyang would only believe in himself and had no faith in illusions. So, to the Sky Devil who needed to seek faith, Muyang was the most difficult opponent. Of course, it did appeal to his taste. S-rank Sky Devil sword. If Muyang was to receive the Sky Devil's blessing on top, he could enter the ranks of the top 10 humans without having to use acceleration. But, to believe what it says plainly, there was something he didn't mention about Azura. To be exact, Muyang was already devoted to Azura. The moment Muyang became a Sky Devil's devotee, Azura would rage. He couldn't be a devotee of both gods. From that influence, the Sky Devil couldn't protect Muyang. It wasn't really a benefit either. It was better to cut down its faith to the ground and receive a reward from Azura. Mumuyang Nim. I have completed 500 flags. Hee. Oscar, whose face was swollen like a goldfish, cautiously approached him. Oscar was beaten so brutally that his whole body shivered in fear. Of course, it would only be temporary, but to Muyang, it was enough for him to just follow his instructions during the battle. In reality, Muyang was good at torture. Not killing them but only making them feel pain. He just didn't like torturing, but if he wanted to do it, he could do it more cruelly than anyone else. Place the flags on top of the arena. Okay. Thanks to the sky blessing from Muyang, this Oscar will definitely place all the flags at the ends of the arena and show the enemy our discipline. That's a long and unnecessary comment. I'll go and place them. As Muyang shook his fist once, Oscar felt appalled and ran off. Was Oscar rambling? Anyhow, Oscar's color was strong. It seemed like his nature didn't die through this much. So that's probably why he ran from Merlin. Afterwards, Muyang turned his gaze. 500 large flags with the Sun Guild's mark were placed at all the corners of the arena. Each was made by a beginner. Afterwards, they were placed at all parts of the arena and made visible to all around. The enemies were already aware the Sun Guild was within the arena. It meant that he didn't really need to advertise it like this. However, what about others who weren't enemies? As long as there was a slight chance that people moved to join them, it was something they needed to do. Either way, someone would come after seeing the Sun Guild's mark. I have no time. Just time was the problem. Enemies were gathering. The situation at the Sky Library Myung saw through Hyungbish was tough. Even if they delayed as most as they could, they would raid within 10 days. On the other hand, the Sun Guild's fighting spirit was continuously dropping. Especially after confirming the message that Alexandro died. To change the wind again, he had no choice but to rely on pure luck. And those thoughts of Myung were fortunately correct. Hyacinth. No, do I now have to call you Guildmaster? Bahamudnim. Hyacinth greeted him with a friendly smile. The Luminescent Guild. The guild master of that place, Bahamud, appeared. The 5,000 people he brought were all members of the Luminescent Guild. Almost half showed signs of battle. I have heard the news. It's unfortunate. I also liked him quite a lot. Thank you. However, I'm okay. I decided to be sad when this trial is over. The flower has now bloomed. Bahamud was greatly pleased. He was 2 m tall and his whole body was muscular as if he had taken steroids. However, there was no hair on his entire body. In many ways, he was a figure of strong impressions. Also, it seems like you are Myung. Bahamud turned his gaze and looked at Myung. From the beginning, it wasn't really a good impression. He gave off a strong fighting spirit and energy and pressured Myung. He gave off a refined, invisible energy that even surprised Myung. However, Myung didn't even budge. He just looked at Bahamud with completely calm eyes. Then Bahamud was surprised instead. You don't counter it but just brush it off? My energy. If Myung had countered it, Bahamud wouldn't be this surprised. However, he had brushed all of it off. In other words, Myung had assimilated his energy. Everyone's energy was different. If there were 5,000 people, there were 5,000 unique energies. Since the life they lived were different, the energy couldn't be the same. But he could assimilate to his opponent's energy and their fighting spirit? Where would such person exist in the world? As expected. They said there was a whirlwind that stirred up the Sun Guild. Now as I look at it, it seems like it was actually a typhoon. Bahamud took back his energy. Take care of your life. I am very excited to fight with you. After leaving a challenging remark, he entered the arena, followed by the 5,000 people. Kim Taehwan. Among them, Taehwan was also included. By seeing how he was near the front, it seemed like his contributions regarding the interaction with the Sun Guild were acknowledged. Taehwan lowered his head slightly. Myung answered with his eyes. Myungnim, don't take what he said to heart. Bahamud always acts like that when he meets a strong person. If he acts like that, it's really the best reception. Hyacinth replied. I don't mind. Even if he talks rough, Bahamud is kind. Even Alexandro had acknowledged it. Bahamud was the only guild master who was friendly to Alexandro. Alexandro had a lot of enemies. You could say there was virtually no group that viewed him favorably. However, only Bahamud acknowledged and approached him. Bahamud. He had that sort of personality. Myung was also aware of it. How could Myung not know, since he was the one who killed him before he returned to the past? It was just ironic because it was Alexandro who plotted against Bahamud and placed a request to the Forest of Death. Quite a few survivors gathered in the arena. Soon, the number of people gathered reached 30,000. They removed the beginners from their number. There were almost 50,000 beginners, but they were relegated to rear support. The command clan is storming in. Best estimated number 70,000. 70,000? It was more than expected. Myung knitted his brows. And he climbed the top of the arena. Lawless Gene. There is Lawless Gene among the enemies. I don't believe it. What? Lawless Gene. Are you saying that the entire Lawless clan became followers? This is crazy. There was a commotion. 70,000. Perhaps there were more enemies than that approaching the arena. Among them, there was Lawless Gene, the head of the Lawless clan. It was definitely unusual for one of the 5 great clans to surrender. Sush. Myung took out anguish. Things already happened and they couldn't be taken back. Taken. Lawless Jean. The command clan. Soon they disappeared out of his sight. However, the one whom Myung imprinted in his eyes continued to be visible. Taken. It seemed like after Bae Sungmin escaped he became brainwashed. However, since he had appeared as an enemy, Myung couldn't just stand by and be attacked. If he wanted to kill him, he would kill him. Lawless Jean was relaxed. This fight. It was a fight impossible to lose. Others within the clan expressed their worries, but Lawless Jean spoke with certainty. We won't lose. However, their reactions were lukewarm. Our opponent is the Sun Guild. Plus, if the Luminescent Guild has joined forces, their power. You're correct. Having superior numbers isn't everything. We didn't need to follow the Sky Devil, no? Lawless Jean clicked his tongue. These ignorant bastards. Of course he understood. However, it wasn't right to show worry after coming this far. But as the head of the clan, he needed to explain to his members who he had somewhat forcefully dragged to this fight. Listen. Do you guys know why Alexandro wasn't on the list to be eliminated? Wasn't he just missing? Stupid. The reason why he hasn't appeared as one of the people to be eliminated was that he was already a devoted of the Sky Devil. There was silence. They were surprised but weren't able to say anything. However, he really did have a point. If someone was a devotee, they didn't appear on the list to be eliminated. It meant they could disappear like the wind. After seeing everyone's reaction, Lawless Jean continued to speak. Alexandro had already thrown away the Sun Guild. He acted like that as he was certain that the Sky Devil would win. I also see it that way. However, Alexandro died as a traitor. Starting off the battle, all kinds of specters entered the arena. Myung personally jumped to the front lines to block the enemy. The star of the Absolute shined, covering his surroundings and consuming everything it considered the enemy in its aura. And despite his past as an assassin, Myung's true power came out in large-scale battles. A battlefield where numerous people faced each other. It was at a place where the dead piled up that necromancers could rampage most extraordinarily. Even more, the Death Lord was the pinnacle of the necromancy classes. Art of Death. Myung didn't conserve his energy. Up until now, he still suppressed himself and didn't show everything, but it was now an important time to go all out, to determine if he would win or lose this battle. Less than 758 corpses were turned into undead. Because you chose random bodies, the artistry is reduced significantly. Art score is 51. He didn't care. He wasn't planning on finding art on a battlefield. At least, in that sense, the Death Lord's and Myung's artistic views were different. Since the Death Lord wanted him to create beauty with every death. However, the goals were the same. To win. Though there are that many undead? Even liches can't raise that many corpses at once. Did the Commander-in-Chief Myung do this? Even decent liches couldn't make over 700 corpses into undead at once. As the Art of Death skill became an A rank, he was able to leap a step forward. Everyone's gazes were on Myung. Every time Myung waved a hand, the corpses revive and chewed on the flesh of their enemies. It was impossible for corpse sorcerers. Although there were more occupations that could control corpses, there were rarely classes that could revive them into functioning undead. Even more raised them at that number. A miracle. Perhaps Myung might not be human. Without any connections, he suddenly appeared and won against strong men who were like glittering stars of the Sun Guild. Not just that. Kong. A dragon made of fire cried. The dragon of fire that grew few dozens of meters tall circled around Myung and his surroundings and ate up the specters. A dragon of fire. The mystical guardian creature of the Sun Guild. That was it. With just its appearance, it gave everyone a strong will to fight. If the undead were Yin, then that dragon was like Yang. Myung was able to deal with both Yin and Yang, and his appearance was like a devoted follower of the Sun God or that of a great lion. The sun god suppresses his flames to approach humans. If you were a member of the Sun Guild, everyone knew about the phrase regarding the sun god. There was a phrase like this. Because the energy of Yang the sun god had was too strong, and caused the humans to burn and die, he was sad and so created the powers of Yin. In other words, he made the moon. As far as it goes, this sort of creation mythology was created because it was a story that focused on the Sun Guild and the sun god, but Muyang's current appearance didn't make it odd for someone else to think he was the reincarnation or the envoy of the sun god. No, perhaps they might have just wanted to believe it that way. The battlefield was a perfect place to grow such faith. If the Sky Devil desired faith, Muyang created it. The sun god's guardian is with us. Praise Dragon of the Sun. Hoi. As if it was responding to them, the dragon raved even more. At the same time, Muyang's influence was instantly increased. The rank of certain targets for elimination has been increased. 4th place, 3,000, to 2nd place, 10,000. The Sky Devil has placed a bounty. From now on, if you kill the targets marked for elimination, you can get double the points. Will you become a follower? It was an obvious trick. Muyang ignored it. If he fell for that sort of sweet talk, his pride would be hurt. He acted more violently. He only placed killing intent on his sword. Guck. Lawless clan, you son of cheese. It wasn't difficult to deal with the specters. The devotees? There were barely any who could be considered strong amongst them. The problem was the Lawless clan. The group where Lawless Jean was the head. He created the Disordered Terror, placed the Armful's Cradle Spirit together with the Disordered Terror, tried to earn a world tree through the Sword Bone Trio, and also ordered Ataraxia to assassinate Muyang. In the end, the Disordered Terror was in the hands of Bei Sungmin and the rest went to Muyang. If you think about it, Lawless Jean was truly a treasure-like existence to Muyang. One that continuously gives. But Muyang shifted his feet. Lawless Jean. It was the first time he got to face him face to face. However, it was uncourteous to go empty-handed. Sword 1, Sword 2 and Sword 3. He took out the 3 talismans and called on them. The Sword Devil, Sword 1's and your level difference is less than 100. Because the Art of Death skill was upgraded to a rank, it no longer needs to take a random piece of equipment. Instead, it needs the death of a 100 people. Death. That sort of thing overflowed here. Not just 100 but the death of a 1,000 people could be provided. Soon Sword 1, Sword 2 and Sword 3 were summoned all together. Thinking. They resonated and even looked at Lawless Jean. As if Lawless Jean was attracted to the summoned power, he looked at Muyang's side of the battlefield. And was greatly surprised. Even he couldn't help but be shocked. The Sword Bones. Kill Lawless Jean. Even the members of the Lawless clan who were rampaging wildly were shaken by this. It couldn't be helped. The Sword Bone Trio was like a symbol of the Lawless clan. Since their stories and strength never lacked to move people. That sort of symbol returned as their enemy. Like seeing a loved one lose their head to a guillotine, the betrayal of the Sword Bone Trio was like a cut to their heart. Although it isn't a betrayal. But they would think of it that way. You bastard. Then the voice of Bahamut was heard from close by. The place where Bahamut was at. There was also Taken. He was strongly pressuring Bahamut as he swung the sword that had a swirling black smoke. The Sky Devil's blessing. And the strange energy that could be felt by that sword. When the two were added, he changed into a strong being that could even pressure Bahamut. However, it was strange. He couldn't see the soul. If it was normal, he should be able to get rid of Taken through soul exploitation. But no soul was visible on top of his head. Perhaps he might be under control due to his soul itself being taken away. However, Taken was at the center of all the specters. He was truly a being full of ups and downs. It seemed like he reigned as the head of the specters in no time. I should kill him. Thump, thump. His heart pounded. Was it the influence of the battle? Or was it because he finally reunited with Taken after a while? Muyang shook anguish once and headed towards Taken. Bei Sungmin. He became Muyang's faithful servant after becoming an archlich. So, you could say he knew something about Muyang's strength and where it originated. I need to quickly pierce through this wall. By looking at the great city from the outside, the place was covered by a red wall. Bei Sungmin was taking out parts of that wall. His strength was restored to some extent and his intelligence was extreme due to the disordered terror. Thus he was able to feel the energies of other undead and Muyang. It required a great amount of concentration, but through this he was able to confirm that Taken was still alive. Master, you can't kill Taken. Bei Sungmin's hands had ripped through almost half of the red wall. As if it was proportional to the damage he was doing to the wall, Sungmin's hands were damaged as well and had to recover repeatedly. Although he had already pierced through several layers of magic, he still had about half left to go. However, Sungmin was in a hurry. After confirming Taken's energy, Sungmin instantly found out what Moon was up to. Taken is bait. Moon knew of Azura. He also knew what sort of power Azura's vassal used. It was because Moon was a human who wasn't a human. Moon was a snake. The true alter ego of Maharaga. At first he didn't know. However, after going through the knowledge of the ancient spirit, the disordered terror, he found related information about him. It was originally forbidden to artificially create a god. However, Maharaga had done something similar to this in the past. Making a god. He experimented using all kinds of specters and fairies. At the time, the disordered terror was one of the candidates. But after the disordered terror had absorbed the world tree, it had become a demigod, but was unable to become a true god and was abandoned. Back then he had failed, and yet once again he is trying to make a true god, not a mere demigod. Either way, Taken was bait. If my master kills Taken, he will be awakened. With master's current body, he can't handle him. Bei Sungmin didn't know his exact name. However, he knew that like Taken, he was a god stuck in Azura's path. Of course, he was a king, but he wasn't at the same level as Taken. His existence was like a god. In the end, Muyang would lose his body like Moon. That was Moon's trick and bait. By making Taken and Muyang face each other for sure, he was going to strike a blow to Azura. Maybe it wanted to summon the king of Azura's path and use him as his servant. Sinning. Bei Sungmin finally pierced through the wall. At the same time, Bei Sungmin, who assimilated with the shadows, moved on the ground and immediately headed towards the location where Muyang was at. A battlefield. A place where the smell of blood reeked. In the center of the place there was Muyang. Muyang's sword pierced through Taken's heart. After attacking with Bahamut, Muyang was successful in creating an opening. The heart was where Taken's essences were gathered. It was where his grains were located. Kiaya. Then Taken let out a scream. Concurrently, a black current flowed out of Taken's entire body and was absorbed into Muyang's. Stay back. Bei Sungmin quickly approached Muyang. It was to make him stay away from the thing that was attached to Taken. However, a black barrier was created and Bei Sungmin bounced out. The barrier instantly swallowed Muyang and started to palpitate. Thump. Thump. The form was like a huge black heart. Taken was strong. He had surprisingly gotten stronger. If Muyang didn't join forces with Bahamut, it would have been difficult for him to do it alone. Besides simply looking at their stats, Taken's skills were quite exceptional. However, the winner was Muyang. He had seen the grains and pierced through them. Nothing in the world could survive after getting their grains pierced. But, did you awaken me? It was a dark world. In the center there was a man who looked exactly like Muyang, who sat on a throne. The throne was old and rusty. Behind him, there was a thin tower that soared up to the sky, but as expected there were cracks all over the place. Who are you? Did you awaken me without knowing who I was? He laughed. An expression which Muyang could never make. He expressed it naturally. This place is Azura's path. I have ruled this place for a long time because of Azura's request. Azura. It was harder to figure out who he was who spoke of Azura as if he was their next door friend. If it was Azura's path, It was one of the 6 places Mu-young had awakened. Merduden had talked about it before. How there was an existence who was sealed in the path. And he remembered how Merduden told him that the existence looked similar to Mu-young. At the time he didn't really listen, but he never thought he would meet that being. Was it the influence of Taken's death? I was here for a long time. So long that I can't remember. I'm talking about hundreds of millions of years, a multitude of layers of time. He was tired. Azura's path was quite a boring place. He wanted to get out of this place, but he couldn't. Who are you? Mu-young felt a chill. His whole body shivered. Mu-young strictly controlled his emotions, but his instincts were warning him, telling him to run away, that this being had surpassed the line. However, he couldn't even move, and so he asked. He thought that if he knew his opponent even a bit, he could escape from the unknown fear. He once again laughed. I'm Lucifer. In this world, I once ruled as a sovereign of evil spirits, and the people had called me Lucifer. The fallen angel Lucifer. Mu-young's eyes shook. In the underworld, in this world, there were no angels. Only devils existed. However, there was someone who was an angel that had appeared. He slowly got up and approached Mu-young little by little. Now give me your body. Mu-young opened his eyes. Then he looked at the world. The rough wind and air blew across his skin. Refreshment was the first thing he felt. Even the scent of blood that brushed against the tip of his nose approached him like a welcome surprise. How long has it been since he smelled it? How long has it been since he felt the warmth of a body? As he stretched out his hand, he began to recognize the sensations. He started to remember one by one the things he forgot after spending so much time dully. It's imperfect. However, the body was terrible. Compared to his main body, it was at the level of embarrassment. No, Lucifer clicked his tongue. But it wasn't all bad. He was wearing clothes that didn't suit him, but it wasn't like his godship had disappeared. Lucifer turned his gaze. A half-crushed skeleton was rolling on the ground. This guy, he was also familiar. Taken, get up. Fog. From his hands an opaque energy poured out. Afterwards, as Taken was wrapped in it, his bones reformed and within time became complete. An unpleasant energy is mixed in. However, there was the Sky Devil's purplish energy mixed in with Taken's aura. To be precise, the sword Taken held. That's where it was all gathered. Lucifer took Taken's sword. Beer. A purple energy. The Sky Devil's power crazily shook. As if it was struggling. However, it soon calmed down. Lucifer completely won against him in strength. Thung. As if he had done his job, Lucifer threw the sword on the ground like garbage. Then Taken regained his senses. Where is this? Why am I on the battlefield? Taken looked at Lucifer as he blinked his eyes. Lucifer also turned his gaze to Taken and started to speak. Do you still see me as Mu-young? If you are not Mu-young. Afterwards, Taken became silent for a moment as he felt something strange. And then he took a step back. Although it was only a step, there was a lot of meaning behind it. Taken, who was always quick to act recklessly, became hesitant for a moment. Lucifer Nim. Now you recognize me. However, that body. I have eaten up his soul. For a human, he had quite the high-quality soul. Thump. Taken stopped. Lucifer was a true sovereign of Azura's path. A leader whom Taken and another king followed. However, Taken acted as an independent entity after escaping Azura's path. However, once again he was involved with Lucifer. Taken's feelings became complicated. There was a lot to learn from Mu-young. On the other hand, he couldn't learn from Lucifer. It was because he was inherently strong and because their difference was too big. What could he learn from someone who was strong from the moment they were born? If his soul was eaten, I probably won't see him again. There was no way for Lucifer to make a mistake. If his soul eaten, it meant that it was already destroyed. It meant that he could never see Mu-young from now on. It was a strange feeling. The time they spent together was short and there weren't really any good memories. Your old friend misses you a lot. Are you talking about Kala? He isn't my friend. Kala was a king who was in a rivalry with Taken in Azura's path. Taken was the evil spirit predator, Kala was the evil spirit seeker. They had the opposite tendency of each other. They both proclaimed themselves as the king of evil specters and didn't hesitate to compete with each other. Like how you came out, shouldn't Kala also come out to make a good fight? Just in time, this body learned something quite useful. Taken used a Death Knight's body to come out to this world. Lucifer ate Muyang's soul and took his body. It was also the same for Kala. He needed a body to possess. Lucifer raised his hand. Then the surrounding corpses were drained of their blood. Soon, magical circles were created in the surroundings and blood completely filled in other areas. As the blood gathered, it shaped into a muscular humanoid form. With a blood-red cape and sharp fangs, the appearance was without a doubt a vampire. Soon the man opened his blue eyes, then kneeled towards Lucifer. Kala greets the evil spirit sovereign. The form I created for you is a counterfeit Jinzhou vampire. Since that is your race, it shouldn't be a big problem for you to move. It's an honor. Kala slightly raised his head and looked at Taken. Taken turned his gaze away. It was because someone he didn't like had appeared. Either way, Taken couldn't be free after Lucifer had appeared. Taken had to accompany him and do what he wanted. A moment later, Kala asked, "But, Sovereign, what are you trying to do here?" "First, I need to bring down those who pretend to be gods without knowing their place." Lucifer wasn't technically a god. He was someone who almost became a god. So he hated to see those who rampaged without knowing their place. He dares to try and use me, the evil spirit sovereign? In addition, he felt uncomfortable thinking that this was the work of someone. Since Lucifer wasn't the type to not know that Moon made a trap out of Taken and made Taken fight against Muyang for him to come out. Then would you kill all the humans in the surrounding? Lucifer hated weak humans. It was also the same for those who were present without his approval. Normally, Lucifer didn't allow even a single human to live in his surroundings. No, there is even a more unpleasant energy raging. I need to kill them first. Kala was slightly surprised. If it was his usual self, Lucifer would have just ordered them to simply massacre everyone. Then Lucifer turned his gaze to the devotees of the Sky Devil. Although humans were bothersome, those who had the powers of the fake god were more disturbing. It was odd, but either way, the priority of exterminating the humans was just pushed back probably, Kala thought. Lucifer took out Anguish. Kissing. Anguish cried. However, it was aggressive. Did it recognize that he wasn't Muyang? Although it was a little object, it was funny for it to differentiate owners. Lucifer grinned as he swung the sword once. Soyawaya. Rough wind pressure. Towards where he swung, the sword was followed by its image and a sharp sword wind was created. The Sky Devil worshippers in its path were bisected. A good 300 people lost their lives by one hand movement. Everyone was baffled. Then huge ice particles appeared around Lucifer's body. Clash. Clash. The particles instantly flew off and exploded in surrounding areas. It was a completely different destructive power compared to the zero explosion that Muyang used. Why is he using the half magic of a human? Kala and Taken both tilted their head. Lucifer. The evil spirit sovereign was a being that reached demigod level. Of course, he knew how to use divine powers and authority. Such skills were embedded in the soul, so it didn't mean that you couldn't use them just because your body changed. It meant that he didn't need to use a human's poorer skills. Lucifer didn't even try to hide his powers. He always used his best attack to crush his opponent. When you thought of the usual Lucifer, it was truly odd. However, just by using the half magic of a human, he instantly killed a few thousand soldiers. I can't just stand and watch my sovereign fight. Kala was the first to get up. He looked at Taken challengingly. At the same time, he transformed into a few thousand bats and swept the battlefield. Taken blanked as he looked at the scene. He didn't know how to express this fidgety feeling. It might be because this was the first time they met after coming to this world, but Taken grabbed the sword he dropped. I'll just follow. Now Myung was no longer in this world. It was in an instant. For them to turn the table and for their enemies to cry while they died. Just one man changed everything. That appearance. Was he really the envoy of the sun god? Everyone went wild. Everyone called out Myung's name. Oh, sun god. The sun god is overlooking us. It was hard to think he was this powerful with normal reason. With just one hand movement, a few hundred people were slain and no one was able to stop him. However, it was slightly different than his normal strength. As if he had become a different person. But it didn't matter to the members of the Sun Guild. Right now Myung was the Sun Guild itself. Eventually, the Command Clan, Lawless Clan, and the devotees of the Sky Devil were completely destroyed. In the middle of it, because Hyung Bish rebelled, they couldn't even retreat. Humans don't know their place. How dare they compare a mere sun god to Lucifer? If you command me, I'll remove all their blood and make them shriek. Cal was furious. Lucifer was a being who failed to become a god. Due to this, he had fallen, but that was why his hatred towards gods was extraordinary. Cal was confident that Lucifer would allow him to do so. But the result was the opposite. It's fine. Since I've come out to this world, I will be generous this once. Generous. A word that didn't seem possible for Lucifer to say popped out of his mouth. The evil spirit sovereign of Azura's path was a tyrant. He didn't compromise. That should have been the case, but for him to be generous. Then someone approached. An archlich that had a pitch-dark robe on. The guy suddenly came up and bowed his head down. Master, thank goodness. You're okay. Who are you? It's me. Bae Sungmin, the one who you created and gave new life to. Bae Sungmin. What's wrong? Lucifer spoke. He spoke as if he didn't have the slightest doubt. There was even a bit of friendliness that could be felt through his voice instead. Please allow me to continue to follow you. Bae Sungmin's attitude had become strange. If he was that strong of an archlich, he would have noticed that the owner of the body had changed. However, Sungmin suddenly bowed down first. Sovereign, his intentions are strange. Kala objected. Lucifer shook his head. Kala, he is following this body anyway. And a very strong ancient spirit smell is given off by this guy. If it is this scent, he would have been the disordered terror that was once as strong as a demigod. Was it because he felt kinship because he was also a demigod? Lucifer continued to talk. I'm going straight to see the guy who acts like a god. Will you follow me? Yes, I'll do my best. Sungmin replied in a loud voice. Soon after, Lucifer turned around. He looked at the sky library that was floating in the air. At that place there was someone who acted to release him. He must have a name. The notion of using Lucifer as a pawn was very ridiculous. Those who disturb what must not be disturbed tend to be ruined. Lucifer moved. Bae Sungmin watched from the beginning since he arrived. But he distanced himself. It was because a bad energy flowed out. He isn't my master. He could know by watching him. He was a totally different being. A person who had an astonishing class. The one who truly reigned. It's strange. However, it was still strange. Myung's existence reflected from him ambiguously. And so he checked. Bae Sungmin had pledged his loyalty himself. If he was a totally different person, he would reject Sungmin, and if his thoughts were correct, a totally different reaction would pop out. Now I understand. The results were quite satisfying. He was mixed. He was being mixed. To be precise, Myung's soul, which he thought had disappeared, was slowly eating away Lucifer's soul. Bae Sungmin was also unsure how his soul was still left. However, Myung had returned once. To be exact, he needed to be destroyed twice in order to make him disappear. Bae Sungmin and no one else knew of this truth. Thanks to this, Myung's soul was moving. Very secretly. So that Lucifer himself wouldn't be aware. Although the speed was slow, he had slowly invaded the area of the soul. The appearance was like watching an assassination. An assassin who had reached the peak, now aiming for their target. The movements were that. If time just flowed like this, or if another opportunity is given, Lucifer wouldn't be able to notice his own death and would be absorbed by Muyang. There was a huge wall surrounding the Sky Library. This was also made by the Sky Devil's power. A condition was imposed wherein entry was possible only after receiving the Sky Devil's permission or by gathering 20 essences. However, Lucifer was not a being that received anyone's permission. He existed alone and had the divine power to accomplish everything without conditions and the like. What a shallow move. It was not bad for something made by a guy impersonating a god, but it was still laughable. To Lucifer, everything he saw was weak and fragile. He gently touched it. That's all Lucifer did. And then the wall that rose to the sky began to shake. Crumble. Crumble. However, it didn't disappear. On the contrary, the Sky Devil's strength increased. Stupid half-wit. Twawak. He placed both hands on the wall and shredded the wall as it was. The wall gradually broke, creating a way for people to pass. However, Lucifer's expression did not relax. It was because he was only able to make cracks instead of removing the wall completely. If he was his true self, he would have destroyed such a wall at once. Since all of his divine power was gathered in Muyang's body, it seemed as if he was limited to this degree. Let's see how far his desperate attempts go. But this was enough. It did not occur to him that a hopeless half-wit could beat him. In addition, the fellow who had caused trouble for Muyang and Taken. That fellow would not be safe from Lucifer. Lucifer took a glance up at the sky. There was nothing there, but he could feel signs of magic at a certain spot. He was being watched. He'd known from the start but had purposely ignored it. Since from the start there was nowhere for him to run to anyway. As he went inside with his hands clasped behind his back, Taken, Kala and Bei Sungmin followed. Moon was watching every scene. It seemed like Lucifer was also conscious of that. But it was unexpected. Lucifer? Are you saying Lucifer was inside? There were signs of someone being sealed inside. A very powerful being. If he was to wake up, Moon thought he would swallow up Muyang, the Azura's vassal. However, Moon, or rather Maharaga, didn't think that being would be Lucifer. He thought that at best an ancient monster or a spirit would pop out. Why did Azura take him in? And for what reason was the fallen angel hiding inside him? Among the 8 Deva Guardians, no one was on good terms with Azura. Rather, they were eager to kill each other. It was the first time for Azura to adopt such a vassal. He was worried. That ill-tempered, wicked, self-involved fellow accepting a vassal was an unprecedented situation. More than that, the existence of the fallen angel was suspicious. An angel was an entity that could never exist here in the underworld. Lemegeton was a type of door that sealed demon gods. A door that connected Earth and the underworld, the spirit world and all other worlds. However, the celestial world was excluded. The 72 demon gods emerged and killed all the angels in Lemegeton and shut the door to the heavens. Consequently, there were no angels in this place. No, it was normal for them to not be there, since the demon gods would not allow that to happen. If angels existed in the underworld, it could become a catalyst. It meant it could serve as an excuse to connect Lemegeton to the heavens, even if it was a fallen angel. Because of this, as soon as the demon gods knew this fact, they would try to destroy Lucifer by any means. Lucifer, the devil of creation. Although he was not included in the 72 demon gods, and his power was also corrupted and was significantly weakened, such a being could sufficiently open the door. If the door to the heavens was opened, once again the war of Genesis would start. If the door to the heavens is opened, the world will eventually be united. Nobody knew who would win. Re-establishing and merging dimensions was comparable to the Big Bang. Azura, what kind of trick are you trying to pull? If Lucifer somehow made his entrance, he would be after the main body. Furthermore, he would try to get rid of even the Sky Devil that was turning into a god. Of course, they had preparations for this matter. An arrangement to control and absorb that guy, Lucifer, was complete. Moon was not an ordinary human. He was Maharoga wearing a human mask. To be unprepared and be beaten by the likes of a fallen angel was a laughable matter. It was a terrible smell. The sky devil. That bastard really gave off a foul smell. What else in the world gave off such a foul smell? Muyang. It's Muyang. He's the #1 target to eliminate? He was the man who beat the temporary leader of the Sun Guild and became the #1 to be eliminated. Inside there were powerful devotees. Those who entered seeking the Sky Devil's power. Although their faith wasn't that big, they gained stronger powers through the Sky Devil's blessing. Reward. The Sky Devil personally offers a bounty on Muyang. Less than 50,000 points are offered per body part of Muyang. It was the most extraordinary reward. Through the points given by the Sky Devil, battle gear could be bought or his blessing could be strengthened. Also, the blessing was like a drug. If it was experienced once, it would become addictive. If each part is worth 50,000 points, considering his hands, feet, head and torso, the minimum would be 300,000 points. The devotees eyed Lucifer and surrounded him in an instant. The stench they radiated made Lucifer's eyebrows furrow. Don't stand in front of me giving off that kind of smell. However, to Lucifer everyone was ridiculous. They were still, after all, humans. Trash wasn't recycled just because it received half of a blessing. Fuck. Lucifer swung anguish. The wind pressure alone decreased their number by half. Purring. The enormous flames of a dragon burned. It burned without leaving even ashes. Monster. Guac. In the blink of an eye, the devotees felt a marked difference in class. That guy is not someone we can deal with. A monster. He was a monster even among the monsters. Lucifer, who had cleaned up the surroundings so that not even one person remained, looked upwards. Fwa. Specters were approaching. The Sky Library was like a guardian that protected the great city. In any case, it seemed it was under the Sky Devil's command. It was a silly move. It was merely stalling for time. At most, it was only a few minutes. Did you use all of your cute tricks? Lucifer asked. Everyone in the Sky Library died. The believers and the lawless clan, everyone. Now only Moon remained. Instinctively, Lucifer identified that Moon was the culprit behind this. An excessively terrible smell was coming from him. However, Moon was relaxed. Lucifer. So you are a bastard that knows me. Then you should know that you shouldn't be so relaxed. Of course I know. If Lucifer is the opponent, even I can't be careless. You bastard. Lucifer's eyes fell on Moon, as if he was scrutinizing his every detail. And then he smiled lightly. So you're fake too. What are you group of fakes trying to pull? Out of everyone, fakes were conspiring together. It was absolutely ridiculous. But no matter how much a fake tried, the fake couldn't become real. Lucifer, do you know where this place is? If you're trying to stall for time, stop. This place is the ancient king's castle. To be exact, it's the tomb of the ancient king. Moon raised his lute. The great city was essentially a place to honor the ancient king. The point from which all was arranged and the start of everything. The tomb of the true king that had been the first to be given the title of king. The tomb will be the means of your sealing and eventual death. You are to be sealed here and become nourishment for the Sky Devil. Sir. There was a sound of wind when the lute was played. At the same time, wind raged all over the great city. Sensing that something wasn't right, Lucifer moved. Takin Kala and Bei Sungmin moved as well. But Moon was defenseless. Lucifer's sword cut off his right arm. Originally, he'd wanted to cut off his head, but the sound of the lute made his movements sluggish. But Moon did not drop the lute. Eventually, hundreds if not thousands of hands popped up from the air. The hands grabbed hold of Lucifer in an instant. How dare you? You think you can swallow me up with something like this? Twok. In that condition, Lucifer took a step forward. Moon could only be surprised. The ancient king's castle was a powerful seal sphere that could restrain even demigods. But Lucifer, who had borrowed a human's body and had his divine powers weakened, was withstanding that seal sphere. The dragon's fire shot out his entire body and attacked Moon. Moon couldn't avoid it. His entire body was torn to pieces as it was. His head was aflame and his skin melted off. Thump. Soon Lucifer drove Anguish into the ground. Before he knew it, he was being led away by the hands. Do you think that you could imprison me, Lucifer, in something like this? Pong. The sky library trembled. Energy spurted from Lucifer and split the ground. The sky library began to crumble and fall. While being held by the seal sphere, he produced that much power. It was truly not a joke that he almost became a god. However, Lucifer was soon sucked into the black hole. So he's the fallen angel Lucifer? Moon, whose body was burnt, mumbled. He withdrew his disdain for the fallen angel. If he faced that guy's true form, even Maharaga would not be able to guarantee his victory. It was darkness. Dense darkness. Lucifer was enraged. How dare he? The likes of that half-wit fake. He came out of Azura's path but was sealed once again. How could he not be upset about it? Then the other side lit up like a lamp. Thump. Thump. Someone walked over. You're really such a moron. A man who approached with a cold-hearted insult. Lucifer knew him too. He was similar to his own appearance, and he was the one whose soul he had devoured. How could you? That fellow was precisely Muyang. But his soul had been destroyed, so how could he exist? It wasn't an illusion. He could actually feel Muyang's spirit. To be more precise, Muyang had already penetrated the deepest part of Lucifer's soul. Now he couldn't be removed either. When in the world had he done this? So what if you have power? After all, the user is no different from a child. Because I'm so annoyed the word moron naturally comes out. It was a reprimand for only being able to use his strength to only that degree. Muyang had been watching all of Lucifer's actions from the beginning. Yes. If he had been smart, if he had been able to perfectly control his power, he would not have been crossed by that annoying piece of work, Moon. Even though Muyang had been caught by the trap using Taken, didn't he look for a way to fix it? However, Lucifer just kept swearing. He was furious. You bastard. Lucifer's face turned red. Because it was true to an extent. But he couldn't touch him. If he destroyed that bastard Muyang's soul again, his own soul would not be unharmed. He couldn't tell how and when he had burrowed in. If you have no desire to spend eternity locked in here, hand over leadership. You half-wit. Muyang knew it well. One thing Muyang didn't want was to continue to be trapped in here. Time couldn't be exchanged for anything. It would be too late if he was to absorb all of Lucifer's soul. It'd take dozens of years, maybe even a century. So Muyang started to negotiate with the bad-tempered, self-righteous and selfish Lucifer. You half-wit. Lucifer's eyes shook. In his entire existence he had never been this humiliated. Even when he tried to become a god and failed, everyone was afraid of his strength. But this guy, who the hell was he? This place was a seal and a spirit world. In this place, Lucifer was able to use his true strength. Of course, Muyang would have also felt his strength that reached a demigod's level. However, Muyang didn't even blink his eyes. As if he dared him to act. Do you want to die? Lucifer spoke. However, Muyang just made a smile. He's no different than a scared dog. The more frightened a dog, the louder the bark. Lucifer. Why would you make threats you won't be able to keep? This is why Muyang said he was no different than a child. From when he was born, Lucifer was strong and had tremendous divine powers in his hands. He lived his life with no worries and troubles. Due to this, no matter how long he had lived, he wasn't as good as Muyang, who lived a single century. Keep trying to endure it, half-wit. If you're not going to give me control, I can just steal it from you. You say you're going to steal it from me? Ha! Ridiculous. Lucifer laughed at Muyang. He only suffered before because he didn't know Muyang's soul was invading his. But since he now knew, he was able to fully defend himself. How could a savage human invade his soul any further, he who had reached demigod level? He was bluffing. It was obvious that Muyang was in a hurry. Muyang's soul would be mixed together with his huge soul and it would soon not even have a form. If you can't stop it even after you know, you're really a half-wit, a fool. Myung didn't care and once again exited into the darkness. Myung was a great assassin. He was the greatest assassin, one who killed Wang Chunglin and became number 0. Even if the opponent knew of the impending assassination, Myung was the type to still succeed. There was only a difference in time and he had never failed. Myung was able to obtain 4 different classes. He had the potential to do so. It was because his soul was that vast. Plus, the strength related to it was placed in the soul. Normally they say if you obtained one type of class, your soul was used up completely. If you considered it simply, Myung's threshold was 4 times the norm. Even more, if you consider the fact that he could combine other tendencies, he was an owner of a vast soul that surpassed simple calculations. However, Lucifer didn't know this truth. A human's soul desired a demigod's soul? Of course a human wouldn't be able to withstand it. It would destroy itself. That was common sense. However, Myung was a being outside of common sense. It didn't take long for him to realize that his thought of self-destruction was a mistake. How dare a mere human? Myung was darkness. He also mastered hiding his body within his mind's territory. How in the world? A spirit, a soul didn't have a form from the beginning. It didn't make sense to hide it. But he had done it. He assimilated into his surroundings and when there was an opportunity, he would extract some of Lucifer's soul. The amount was very little but it was extremely unpleasant. You're more used to managing souls than me, the evil spirit sovereign? It wasn't possible. Although the soul didn't have a form, it had a basic color. The life of the person. The color changed depending on his ups and downs. Even if he wanted to hide it, it wasn't possible due to this. If he was to hide it, it would be because his soul was white. However, a person with a white soul couldn't exist in this world. But Myung's soul had different kinds of color. If he combined them all, it became an opaque white. It was absurd. His protective color. Lucifer thought of a chameleon. An animal evolved to assimilate to its surrounding color to protect itself. He was proficient enough for it to be like a natural ability. Lucifer's thoughts were mostly correct. Myung had evolved like that to instinctively protect his character and his soul. He protected his identity by looking at other people's stories after taking their status viewers. On the other hand, it meant Myung couldn't remember who he was exactly. It was the reason why he couldn't help but have different colors. On the contrary, it was the reason he could become a white color. Are you afraid? He suddenly appeared. From behind, he whispered quietly in his ears. When he turned around, Myung wasn't there. Lucifer searched within the darkness. Of course, he was unable to find Myung. Come out. You stupid rat. The spirit world greatly shook. However, there was a very small amount of insecurity mixed within his voice. To Lucifer, Myung was the unknown. There was no one like him until now. Even when he fought against numerous specters, he had never seen someone like him before. The unknown was fear. Lucifer was currently feeling fear. Because he didn't want to admit it, he struggled more. His bloated body was easier to become a target. A boundless vicious cycle. Lucifer's last hope was for Myung to self-destruct as he tried to take a demigod's soul. However, he didn't create any cracks at all. He absorbed whatever he took in. What kind of a person could handle a demigod's soul? Was he truly a human? Lucifer couldn't catch him. He couldn't find him. He couldn't see him or feel him. Like a ghost. No, not a ghost. Something unknown. A mysterious existence. It was unthinkable for him to feel this sort of emotion towards a human. There is no color. No scent. No form. I'm not your delusion. Swoosh. He approached. However, Lucifer was not able to budge. He was caught. His thoughts were read. Lucifer tried to treat the unknown existence of Myung as his delusion. It was because if this was all a product of his imagination, everything was explainable. What was scarier was the fact that Myung didn't demand it. He just ate up little by little off Lucifer's soul endlessly. If a few decades or centuries were to pass by like this, Lucifer's soul would disappear without a trace. To humans, 100 years was a long time, but to Lucifer, 100 years was like an instant. Due to the difference in perception, it made Lucifer more frightened. Not an entire 100 years, but only a 100 years. To humans, it was like knowing you'd die in a year. Control. He just needed to hand over control of the body. Afterwards, the soul controlling the body couldn't consume Lucifer's. However, would he be able to escape this place just because he simply gave him control? Muyang's strength was like a drop in the ocean compared to Lucifer's. If Lucifer wasn't able to get out, Muyang also couldn't. Do you have a way to get out of this place? Of course I do. Unlike your empty head, I'm one who thinks a lot. All of his words were insulting. Muyang was insulting Lucifer. He had never been insulted this much in his life before. What is that method? I'll tell you if you hand over control. All right. However, you also need to give me something. Tell me. Your identity. Tell me your true identity. Lucifer couldn't accept it. The fear he felt. He found that his fear was based on the unknown. So if he could just figure out Muyang's identity, this fear would also disappear. Muyang grinned. His true identity. There was one thing. The absolute. There was no distinct characteristic in identity like this. At the same time, Muyang's mental landscape was filled with red light. Like the sky devils, but it wasn't a disgusting light, rather it felt sacred. What he said was funny, but he couldn't laugh. He's chosen by the star? Even more, the star of absolute had chosen him. Lucifer was taken back. However, Muyang was quite far from being an absolute. Nevertheless, he didn't think it was false. It might be that he was rationalizing. That because he was the chosen one of the star of the absolute that he could manage his soul. He detested playing this hide-and-seek game any further. Lucifer bit his lips and declared his defeat. Lucifer has given control of the body. Authority, soul's unity, has been created. From now on, when Lucifer allows, you can borrow his strength. You have succeeded as authority predator. Like the word authority predator allows you to prey on authorities. The right to devour a godhead and build strength. However, be careful. The owners of true authorities are powerful. Lucifer became small once again. It seemed like he didn't think the superiority of his soul would fall behind. It was because Muyang's elusiveness that even hid his soul made Lucifer sick. If it was a physical fight, there was no way for Lucifer to lose against Muyang. Then I'll get out. As if his victory was obvious, he moved freely. Muyang was reckless. It seemed like he studied quite a lot about the great city. He probably thought that the ancient king's castle was a good place to summon the sky devil. However, Muyang knew a lot more about this castle. There would probably be no one else who knew the ancient king's castle better than Muyang. This place is a graveyard. So there must be a gravekeeper. A gravekeeper managed graves. Of course, they could also remove the seal. And the gravekeeper of the great city was the Sun Guild. It was because it was the Sun Guild who unlocked the seal of the ancient king, captured him and built this great city. The Sun Seal. That was the key. Muyang had the seal. Bei Sungmin had fallen. Taken and Kala were also unable to stop Moon. A slight difference. Because Moon had also lost a lot of strength, he wasn't in the position to be relaxed. You wretched bastards. Die and become nutrients for the Sky Devil. They fought for 3 long days. Probably because they were already dead, they didn't die. Nor did they get tired. An endless war of attrition. To end this seemingly endless fight, Moon raised his lute. Sizzing. At that moment, the black sphere split. When a sword popped out and split the sphere, Muyang jumped out from that place. Oh, how did you? Moon widened his eyes. That seal was his critical move. It was even strong enough to seal Lucifer as well. But was there a way to escape the seal? Even if there was one, how could Lucifer know about it? However, when he looked carefully, it seemed like he changed a bit. He wasn't Lucifer. He was Hellhorse. Unicorn. Nay. Soon 2 horses approached from the sky while they spread their wings wide. The black hell horse. The pure white unicorn. The 2 only followed Muyang. They were able to see the nature of the person, and when Lucifer came out they hid themselves. However, since the real Muyang came out, there was no reason for them to stay put. Moon spoke as the hell horse and the unicorn stood beside Muyang. Muyang. As it was Muyang. Not Lucifer. After realizing this, Moon lightly trembled. It wasn't possible. A mere human drove away a demigod-like being? How could a mere human do that? If he had really driven away Lucifer, it was no small matter. There was no way Moon wouldn't know the true meaning of it. A completely unexpected move. Even more, a move that he didn't make any preparations for had appeared before him. Are you afraid of me? Muyang spoke. It was the same question he asked Lucifer. It was so. To Moon, Muyang had once again become the unknown. The unknown would produce fear, and Muyang knew about this better than anyone else. He also knew how to use it. It was no different than resuscitation. A crisis had become an opportunity. On the other hand, Moon was facing the backlash of his own trick. Because if he hadn't placed that sort of trap on Taken, Muyang wouldn't have gained this sort of strength. Lucifer wouldn't have appeared, and he might have even lost the fight against Moon. Muyang's eyes sank bleakly. Fragments of the fissure. And the authority Moon had. I'll eat it all up. Moon was already in a weak state. Even after he had been attacked by Lucifer, he still had to face Bei Sungmin, Taken, and even Kala. Lucifer, it's not him. Everyone's reactions were not different from Moon's. It seemed that even Taken and Kala couldn't believe that Lucifer had disappeared from the surface. Just one person. Only Bei Sungmin was excluded from this surprise. My lord, you're out. Bei Sungmin was struggling with the Azure King's left arm that Muyang had given him, now half ripped. By looking at how he wasn't able to regenerate, he had used up all of his magical powers. Nevertheless, Bei Sungmin was peaceful. No, he became peaceful when he saw Muyang. As if he knew that Muyang would overcome Lucifer. Feng. Muyang pulled anguish out and gripped it. Maharaga. He was the god of music and was one of the 8 Deva guardians that protected illegality. Originally, he had discarded his arrogant personality and modestly crawled, calling it service behavior. But it seemed that Moon was far from things like that. He now knew as Lucifer was inside. He was something else that was covered in Moon's shell. So that was why he was called fake. This can't happen. Huang. Moon took a big step. A hole formed in the ground, and from there all sorts of sounds flowed out. Something Moon didn't expect happened. Moon was in a great panic about this unforeseen disaster. Did he perhaps think everything would move according to his plan? If that was so, then he looked at the world too easily. Although he had succeeded in setting up the situation, the world was full of variables. At least he had induced it in the worst way for himself. The play is over. Muyang said. This series of events itself was nothing short of a cheap skit. He wanted to swallow up the great city and create a god? Even more, through everybody's false faith. If someone had heard it, they would have smirked. His work was likened to a skit? Moon's expression hardened and he raised his lute. You who are a human couldn't have fully gained the powers of a demigod. It's probably nothing more than a bluff. Dryering. Moon played the lute. Fong. Then a fierce typhoon raged and aimed for Muyang. But it wouldn't be like the hell horse and the unicorn to just watch him. The hell horse decided to follow Muyang ever since he had been defeated once. And his sense of loyalty had increased when Muyang got the unicorn. The same was true for the unicorn. Muyang had saved it from being manipulated by the devil, and it was now repaying that kindness. They were both top-rank monsters. They were both beneath Moon's level, but if they combined their entirely different powers, they were able to fight back. 1 + 1 was not equal to 2 but 4 or more. Because their powers were so different, akin to yin and yang, that combining them had a much larger effect than if they were similar. Quadragigic. The hell horse compressed space. The unicorn's horn lit up and sent the compressed space flying towards Moon. How dare such insignificant creatures attack me? In a way, his tendency seemed similar to Lucifer. With his features in a frown, Moon rapidly flicked the strings of the lute. Jijik. Jijik. A number of notes came out and soon became a din. It was a sensation of penetrating the flesh and piercing the heart. It was a sound that made the body automatically cower. Quang. Quaquaquang. The compressed space and sound met, creating a large number of vibrations between them. Everything in the surroundings began to get sucked in. In the meantime, Myung moved. It wasn't just the authority predator that was earned after experiencing the battlefield and meeting Lucifer. Myung's eyes were stained jet black. Soon, the power of death came out of his entire body. Death. What was also closely associated with corruption. Art of Death skill rank has increased. A-A+++. It is possible to fully restore the abilities of the dead. The Dance of Death, 0, has been created. The Dance of Death? Transcends space and encounter the death of everything. The power of death that penetrates even gods. This is the Death Lord's power. The quality was different to the death that Hyung-bish used. Myung became able to encounter death itself. The power to transcend space. To be precise, it was the technique of seeing the soul's grain. If severing grains destroyed matter, severing the grains of the soul severed the intangible. In Myung's jet black eyes, Moon's death was seen. He also saw the envoy that was linked to him. That envoy. Maharaga. He knew the moment he saw it. That he was Maharaga. He stole Moon's body. Similar to what Lucifer had tried to do to Myung, Maharaga had stolen Moon's body. At any rate, what Myung saw was a world of death. Now it was possible for him to even see gods. Although he had a link to Azura, this was the first time he had seen a god. A god? He didn't feel that much awe. Wishing for belief from Myung was a luxury. Myung believed only in himself. The Dance of Death really makes it possible to kill even gods. Maharaga transcended life and death. However, he saw it. His death. The extinction of his soul. Myung, who had degraded his existence and spat upon his effort, ran towards Moon and Maharaga. He would cut him down. Zahat. Horns rose. When two horns rose, the world slowed down and it was possible for him to see in increasingly more detail. There were even grains in sound. To be precise, sound was transmitted through matter. If he could read the direction of the matter, it wouldn't be hard to attack. Quang, quang, quang. Each time anguish hit the notes, a large amount of explosions were created. Even so, Myung didn't stop and advanced. Fuck. Finally, he reached him. But it wasn't Moon. It was Maharaga who was behind Moon. Maharaga trembled violently. Although he barely cut his collar, he had cut his soul. He had hurt a god. You bastard, what have you done? Moon, or rather Maharaga, asked. In an exceedingly surprised voice. Even Lucifer was unable to detect his true self. But how had a mere human seen him and cut him? How did an insignificant little thing do this to me, a god? A storm was formed around them. A storm of sound that swallowed everything. It collided with the compressed space that the hell horse and the unicorn had discharged, and hit the great city and caused great damage. Then Moon discarded his lute. As soon as he lifted both hands, a transparent sword was created. You must be killed. Maharaga felt threatened by Myung. For a mere human to have the authority to cut a god. He couldn't acknowledge it. If he left it like this, it would ruin him someday. So, before it started, he had to nip it in the bud. Any more commitment was a bit irrational, but Maharaga made up his mind to try his best to kill Myung. Kim Tae-hwan, Hyacinth, the Sun Guild and the Luminescent Guild, they were all looking at the Sky Library. A huge boom. Storms that formed everywhere. Please be safe. Hyacinth muttered. There was nothing she could do for Myung, who was in the Sky Library. The battle was so fierce she couldn't even get close to it. If she got drawn in, she would not be able to escape. Those who were classified as super strong had left for reconnaissance. but returned while shaking their heads. That was because the Sky Devil's wall had been rebuilt. It was blocking invasions from the outside. Already a few days passed. They only watched as they eradicated family ordinances. Also, they were amazed. Sometimes they were in awe, and occasionally they let out a cry of sadness. They didn't know how the fight would progress, but the scale itself was different. If those who had reached into the top 10 strongest fought, it seemed it would progress in that way. The strongest 10 weren't violent between each other. It was like a tradition from long ago. It's like watching a battle with the Demon King. Abdullah came up beside Hyacinth. A battle with the Demon King? Have you seen it before? Before the great city was established, battles between the humans and the Demon King were plentiful. It was the same for me. Alexandro as well. It had been peaceful for over dozens of years. The humans had stagnated when the demons and even the devils were no longer seen. As if in reproach of that, the Sky Devil's trial had been given. The humans who were drunk on safety were powerless in the trial. If it had been like it was before, if it had been those who had fought the Demon Kings at that time, a trial like this would have been overcome in an instant. Even imagining how it would be now if not for Muyang was enough to make him break out in goosebumps. If this trial passes, we have to wake up. Forget about past comforts. Abdullah emphasized. Kurung. A black thunderbolt struck. Hyacinth looked at the Sky Library and started to talk. I hope Muyang is okay. He's a strong man. Please believe in him. Muyang was still shrouded in a veil. Even Abdullah could not see Muyang's end. And the divine power that was last seen. Wasn't it enough for him to be revered as the emissary of the sun god? I believe in you. Hyacinth bit her lip. He was someone who he had to kill at all cost. But he couldn't kill him. After a battle akin to a natural disaster, the one that fell to his knees was Moon. The body that had received the strength of a god was slowly starting to melt away. Moon cried out. It can't be. This kind of thing can't happen. Muyang read his every move. Even if the weakened Moon received the power of his god even more, there was a limit as his body was already weakened, and breaking his weakened attacks was easier than Muyang thought. He was overloaded and in the end was even melting down. Of course, even so, in a simple contest of strength, Muyang was behind. However, there was a lot of things Muyang could use to his advantage. You bastard! Who the hell are you? You're not the kind of fellow to be Azura's vassal. Azura, the Death Lord and King Slayer. Muyang had gained a lot of strength. Azura would only be one of them. It seemed like even the unbeatable Maharaja was unable to read him entirely. That was his contradiction. Muyang sliced Moon's throat. Birak. As his connection to Maharaja snapped, his life disappeared. He hadn't been able to kill Maharaja, but Moon, who was connected to Maharaja, had been eliminated. Because Moon had been killed, Maharaja wouldn't be able to easily run wild like before. The Immortal King's fragment, too, has been received. A fragment of the fissure has been obtained. The strength of the Authority Predator is activated. The strength of the Authority Predator is suspended. Suspended? Moon had been killed. His heart stopped. However, he hadn't been annihilated completely. Though it was weak, a slight connection was made with Maharaja. With his eyes wide open, he spoke to Muyang. I will use this body as nourishment and revive the Sky Devil. Try to block this as well. Maharaja wanted to kill Muyang by any means. If it was difficult using Moon's body, he would just borrow the Sky Devil's strength. In an instant, Moon's body turned to dust and began to scatter. The dust blew up into the sky and the sky turned more and more purple. Quiet. A sound like a shriek was heard. However, when Muyang heard the scream, his heart raced quickly. It was the feeling he had when he first encountered Lucifer. Trembling. Overwhelmed. Shortly after, something came down from the sky. An enormous leg was the first thing that appeared. The Sky Devil has awakened. However, his formation has only been half completed. He is unstable. Please be cautious. The Sky Devil will use everything as his nourishment since he wants to be perfected. Puang. Well over 100 meters. He wore a golden helmet, but both hands were fettered to an iron ball. Like a criminal. However, nothing could compare to that being. He's the Fairy King. Wuhi's body trembled. She instinctively felt dread. Fear. At that moment the sun mirror began to shine. Why is this, to me? A light flowed out from Taken's cape. Quickly took shape. He'd been waiting for this moment. It was difficult to determine who it was just by the shape of the light alone. However, he seemed to know the voice that flowed from there. Alexandro. Myung glared fiercely. However, there was no time to think. As if it was shot out, a light in the shape of Alexandro was launched towards the Sky Devil. The Sky Devil didn't move. While he was entangled in the black hole by the majesty of a great mountain, he only continued to scream out loud. However, even that black hole was falling apart little by little. The Fairy King made a huge mistake and fell into the void. Our fairy world was also broken with this event. That's what Wuhi's mother said. Wuhi's body trembled as she climbed on top of Myung's shoulder. And then she hugged Myung's throat tightly. Fairies had no houses of their own. That meant they had no such land like the humans had for them to exist on. Therefore they would make trials and receive homes as a reward. That instigator had now appeared before his eyes. Alexandro Quintart. Myung was unsure of what he was about to do. The Sun Guild's guildmaster. One of the top 10 strongest humans. It was a move prepared by him who had gone by numerous other titles than that. Myung thought that perhaps even his own death had been faked. The Alexandro Quintart that Myung knew was a guy that would do anything that would benefit him. A cold-blooded fellow. But he had disappeared. Only carrying the sun mirror. Perhaps through the death of his body he had concealed his existence and hidden something like his evil machinations or soul in the sun mirror. The sun mirror was a mirror as the name suggested. It could absorb or store what was reflected in it. But without knowing its existence, Moon had disregarded it. If his largest obstacle, the Sun Guild, and its master died, he thought that the success of the trial was natural. However, a variable named Myung had appeared, and even Alexandro had hatched a final twist. Yes, a twist. There was no way he would have done such a complicated thing for no reason. A plan. This was definitely something that had to be done in order to avoid Moon's attention. Myung activated the Dance of Death. And he saw Alexandro, who was in the form of light, move as if he were being absorbed by the Sky Devil. Kwaia dash. The Sky Devil screamed aloud. The king who was created, cast away the black hole that restrained him and wailed. He made a desperate attempt to push out what had entered him. Spirit assimilation. Myung frowned. Alexandro's soul was covering the Sky Devil's unstable soul. Then it seemed as if Myung knew what his move was. The sun mirror could hold or store a reflection. And it had the powerful power to expel evil. Now Alexandro was no different from the sun mirror itself. That was the reason why the Sky Devil's spirit, which was controlled by evil, was forced to react strongly. Alexandro's goal was the Sky Devil from the start. The hair on his whole body stood on end. What was he to do? If Alexandro swallowed up the Sky Devil, what would follow? Ah, that can't happen. That can't happen. He suddenly rose. She flapped her wings and tried to fly away. However, the Sky Devils surrounding were dangerous. The Sky Devil had the ability to damage even the soul. Even if it was a fairy without a physical form, it would die if it was hit. Myung seized Wuhi. Then Wuhi, who was on the verge of tears, spoke. Something different is coming. If the two are combined, then they will just become a different creature. A different creature? Wuhi doesn't really know either. It just feels very dangerous. Mother said that Wuhi's senses for this kind of thing were very good. Who Wuhi called mother was the fairy queen. Myung frowned. It would become a different creature? Wuhi never acted like this before. However, he couldn't figure it out. If it wasn't the Sky Devil or Alexandro, who was it? An absolute nothing, a doppelganger. Wuhi's eyes became glazed for a moment, as if she was possessed by something. Soon the Sky Devil stopped screaming. Then something surprising started to happen. The hulking figure that had exceeded 100 gradually began to shrink. By half. By half again. It continuously shrunk until a human's figure was formed. The body was certainly Alexandro's. However, as if it were made of light, his face had no features. There was only a mouth on his face. It's strange. Why doesn't he have a face? It wasn't the Sky Devil and it wasn't Alexandro Quintart. The unidentifiable figure tilted its head while touching its face. But who was it? When Muyang looked at him with the dance of death, he was formless. Absolute nothing. A character that could become anything. Was it really a doppelganger? A doppelganger was the name given to the imaginary monster that could change its appearance into any form. In the underworld, a monster such as the doppelganger didn't exist except in stories. If it existed, the humans would not have been united and would have been destroyed in the end. It's ominous. However, it was ominous. It wasn't only Muyang who felt that way. Taken, Kala and even Bei Sungmin became very tense. It wasn't a god. For some reason they were filled with a sense of foreboding. Sure enough, he stood, looked sideways and clapped his hands. Genetic information. Yeah, that is lacking. Since this body was made with only soul information, I need the genetic information to fit the soul in order to complete it. A monologue. He didn't seem to like his incomplete body. The guy looked to one side. To be precise, he looked at the arena where the Sun Guild members were gathered. Muyang scowled. Feng. He withdrew anguish and quickly moved. This fellow was an ominous being. His instincts were warning him. If he left it as it was, he wouldn't be able to undo what would happen. Although he has used up his mental energy dealing with Moon, he still had some left. He could remain in a world that was 4 times slower for 5 seconds. 2 horns rose and Muyang advanced with all his might. Fuck. He cut off his arm. Fuck. He pierced his chest. He cut him into pieces. Thud. His head fell to the ground. However, he wasn't dead. You use an interesting technique, huh? The guy, whose face alone was left on the ground, grinned. At the same time, his scattered parts gathered and formed a whole body once again. Even his grain regenerates? He had cut his grains. He had done that so that he would have no choice but to die. However, he had been restored. Look like he restored the time of his body. If the grain was cut, death was certain. That was the case with living things. However, if the body's time could be restored, it could be said that the impact would be nothing whatsoever. It meant that there was no use cutting the grains. How did you do that? Like this. The creature mimicked Muyang's actions. And then the world's time slowed down. It was this way. However, it's not all that effective. Don't you get tired of this quickly? He said inside a slowed world. Like Muyang achieved, a world that was 4 times slower. He's dangerous. Somehow he was even more dangerous than a demon god. He had to kill him now that he was just born. His senses were screaming. Muyang wielded anguish for the 2nd time. Feng. A dragon's soul wailed and attacked the fellow as it was. If he turned him to dust before he even had time to recognize it, he wouldn't be able to restore his body's time. 2 seconds remained. Muyang poured everything into it. Twirr. He moved so quickly that an afterimage remained. Stop. Stop. The doppelganger shouted. Muyang ignored him. Eventually he had broken him up like powder. Muyang frowned and took a deep breath. That moment. Siruru. Reproduction. The powder gathered once again and took form. Did it mean that even if it was to this degree it wouldn't work? But it seemed that Muyang hadn't failed entirely. The recycled guy frowned. He trembled and stepped back. There was no expression, only the actions of fear itself. Seemed he did not know that Muyang could do that much. Scary. You're scary. The doppelganger ran away. in the direction of the arena. In the direction where the Sun Guild members and Hyacinth were. However, the horns retreated inside Muyang's forehead. Lucifer. Muyang knocked on the soul door. Deafening silence. If Lucifer would lend him some strength, Muyang might have been able to do something, but because he had been forced into yielding leadership, it didn't look like he had any intention of helping right away. Damn. Muyang inwardly retched. I have to stop him. He couldn't stand there and do nothing. Muyang summoned all the undead. He called even the Sword Bone Trio and King Mutant. That guy. Kill him. He was blocked off. If he was beaten by Muyang, the other undead could not be ignored either. The Sword Bone Trio moved their swords. The other undead, led by Taken, also quickly joined in. Please stop. Guak. The repetition of his death and return to life ensued. They would see how far he could recycle himself. It would not be possible to regenerate infinitely. It was when he had been killed and regenerated scores of times. His body suddenly shone. Alexandro's powers. Among them was the use of concealment and teleportation. Those skills were why Alexandro, who did not die even when he was killed, survived to the end. In terms of his teleport skill, it was limited to 1 use per day, but it was the perfect skill for escaping danger. When he felt fear that surpassed death, he used it instinctively. Inside the light, his body became transparent. And when the light faded, his body wasn't there. The doppelganger had run away. He was just like a newborn baby. He was a being that had made a living in the void. However, he only had a little knowledge. Of course, he was very curious and he was deeply interested in Muyang, the person he first met. But at the same time, he learned terror, too. He was scary. Muyang's gaze, the feeling of his flesh being cut. The doppelganger was afraid of everything. He had become dust dozens of times. He thought he couldn't come back again. It's because I wasn't complete. I only have to become complete. If he didn't want to suffer from this kind of thing, completion was the only recourse. A body wrought by soul information. However, it lacked the genetic information that shaped the body. And that was close at hand. Hyacinth. A human made by my original genes. Alexandro's memory. If he absorbed Hyacinth, he could perfectly assimilate her body and soul. Twang. The doppelganger teleported inside the arena. Thump. And he landed on the ground. What is that now? It doesn't have a face? Is that thing a spirit too? First let's kill it. Thousands of Sun Guild members were gathered in the arena. They drew their weapons to kill the doppelganger that had suddenly burst in. The man wielding a weapon. Kill him. Was it because he was beaten once by Muyang? The doppelganger was enraged. It seemed as if they weren't even strong like Muyang. It was because the strong persons had gone out to hunt the colored spirits. Inside the arena, there were very few that could really be called strong. Soon after, the doppelganger's hand changed into a weapon. And he copied and reflected the skills the humans used as they were. Ice, flames, and lightning. He commanded all skills quite freely. Ache. He's reflecting the skills as they are. No. He's taking them. He's taking our skills. When they realized what was happening, it was already too late. Get lost. The doppelganger was gradually growing confident. I am not weak. Furthermore, he was confident that if he caught and consumed Hyacinth, he could become even stronger. Thump thump. He took a sniff. The girl that smelled the same as him was a short distance away. As the human stepped back slightly in fear, the doppelganger ran into the giant tent. Hyacinth. My genes. Hyacinth turned her head. The interior was an infirmary. Numerous patients were lying down and Hyacinth was treating them. However, she thought the disturbance outside was merely the usual fight with the spirits. Without warning, Hyacinth heard the voice of the intruder that entered and spoke. Alexandro. I need your blood. There was no time to think. In the blink of an eye, the doppelganger approached. And bit Hyacinth's throat. Quack. Muyang entered the tent. With a splash. Blood pooled on the floor. Before Muyang had approached, the doppelganger had escaped, and as a result, someone had fallen to the floor. Muyang. Hyacinth. With a face that had turned pale, the girl gave a small smile. You are okay. Muyang quietly approached. After closing her neck wound, he felt her pulse. Thick. His hand bounced off the moment he touched it. A strong curse. The curse engraved in the doppelganger's tooth had formed on Hyacinth. I was too late. He forced himself to look at Hyacinth through the curse. He immediately shook his head. It wasn't simply sucking her blood. It was sucking her life, the spirit of her source. Because of the strong curse, even if he brought an elixir, it would be difficult to revive her. Even with the blessing of a saint or the horn of a unicorn, the results would be the same. Furthermore, they had to be in a refined form at once. Time was too short. I'm glad you are okay. Hyacinth stretched out a hand. However, she wasn't able to touch Muyang. Hyacinth lowered her head as it was. He stopped breathing. There were no words. No words came out. Death. Death was something that was very familiar to Muyang. He had killed few thousands of people emotionlessly. Among them there were heroes, villains, ordinary people, elders and children. Did he feel guilty when he killed them? No, he didn't. Although it was the effects of brainwashing, it had become Muyang's true nature. However, Hyacinth was a girl who showed genuine interest and goodwill towards Muyang. Without any price. It was a rare scene in the underworld, and the feeling was almost impossible to find. Suddenly he thought of the meaning of the flower hyacinth. Modest love. She was a girl who embodied the meaning of the flower. However, the curse of the doppelganger was deeply embedded in her soul. Even when you die, the soul should be left behind, but there was nothing. His curse was the curse that took away a person and their life itself. He was someone that destroyed everything regarding humans that were involved with beauty. Perhaps he might have taken the soul as well. Even if he was to turn Hyacinth into an undead, she would be hollow. By thinking objectively, she wouldn't be that great of a help. Ting. Pink. Muyang looked down at the ring that dropped to the ground. Hamel's rune ring. The sacrifice needed to make Diablos. He already had Oris's throne ring and the lunatic sovereign's ring. If he had this ring, he could summon Diablos at the altar. From the beginning, didn't he approach Hyacinth to get this right? It would have been so, but he felt an array of complicated emotions he couldn't express with his words. Hyacinth worried about Muyang even until the end. If she was a normal girl, she would have shivered her body in pain. The pain felt by the body dying due to the curse would have been excruciating. Muyang carefully picked up the ring. Rest in peace. The doppelganger won't be able to escape my hand. This was all Muyang could do and was able to do. A form of memorial that only Muyang could do. Muyang's expression hardened even further. I just need to make an altar. He thought he should commence the summon of Diablos a bit earlier than he planned. There wasn't much about making an altar, since he just needed to make a similar form and offer the right sacrifices. However, a Diablos devotee needed to wish for it, but Muyang decided to solve the problem on his own. Lucifer, I'm going to borrow your divine powers. He just brought class, not strength. Lucifer had to give permission to use his strength, but Muyang was able to imitate class as he absorbed Lucifer's soul. Lucifer frowned deeply, but Muyang ignored him. Right now, Lucifer's opinions weren't important. Then he set up an altar and placed the 3 rings one after another. Come out. Spat. A thunderbolt struck. Muyang was imitating Lucifer's demigod-like divine powers. And like a magnet, something was dragged to the altar. 3 rings were all gathered. The ceremony of the altar is now starting. There wasn't much to call it a ceremony. Although they said Diablos and devotees, they were all nothing but part of a system. Since Diablos wasn't even a god. In the past there was literature that Diablos had been a powerful being, but all that is sealed is just his weapon. If someone just meets the criteria it was supposed to summon. The sky library that was half destroyed. From that place, a dark fog approached. The fog swallowed the 3 rings and spat out another. Diablos, S+, has been summoned. A great sword with the shape of a red dragon. Muyang grabbed the thing that was slowly coming down from midair with his hand. And when he looked at it closer, the related information popped up. Name, Diablos. Rank, plus. Classification, weapon. Endurance, 350,000, unrepairable. Effect. A weapon that can change its form depending on what the user wants. It destroys and places a curse on everything it touches. In the past, Diablos had used it, but because of its strength, it was sealed. Asterisk legend. Asterisk it diffuses the curse of dragon horse to every enemy. Asterisk strength plus 55. Asterisk intelligence plus 40. Asterisk all stats plus 10. Asterisk all barrier type skill is strengthened. Plus. It was the same tier as the Immortal King's breastplate. On top it was a weapon. It was more difficult to obtain a good weapon. I can probably make a mark on the doppelganger's body. Muyang thought about it. The reason why the doppelganger was able to turn back the time on his body. He needed a strong weapon. It wasn't enough to have it just cut and slice. He needed a powerful weapon that would take away everything once it touched. This might be enough, but Muyang desired more. Eat it. He raised Anguish. Gur. Grr. Then a strange sound came out of Anguish. The moment it looked at Diablos, its greed was triggered. That it wanted to eat it. That it wanted to make that sword's power its own. Muyang let it be. Then Anguish started to break Diablos down into atomic units and eat it up. Greed has been activated. Anguish has absorbed Diablos. The name, Anguish. Rank, S++. Classification, weapon. Durability, 357,888, unrepairable. Effect. A sword with the anguish of Gremory. A special condition has been activated. Asterisk myth unique. Asterisk it diffuses the curse of the vampire lord to every enemy. Asterisk ability to steal blood from the opponent and recover the stamina of the user. Asterisk greed sword absorption. From the absorbed sword, it brings everything over including its durability. Asterisk strength plus 75. Asterisk fighting aura plus 30. Asterisk intelligence plus 4. Asterisk all stats plus 15. Asterisk cry of rage. Asterisk all attacks and all barrier type skill are strengthened. Grr. As if it was satisfied, Anguish quiet down. Power is overflowing. There was another surprising fact. As he absorbed, he was further strengthened. Basically, it was added to his original stats. A legend-level weapon had transformed into a myth level. There were only demigod, transcendent, and god-level equipment left after this level. However, even in the past, Muyang had rarely seen AS++ level equipment. He was able to count the amount with his fingers. He had gained one among them. Curse of the Vampire Lord? However, there was something significant. Not a curse of a dragon horse, but a vampire lord. A vampire lord eats demons that are smaller than itself. It's a curse that embeds on souls, and it is hard to make it into the blessing of a sage king. After reading the instructions, he nodded. From Anguish, ominousness flowed out. Its level was enough to close in on the doppelganger. He was also a being born from evil. He wanted to find out whose curse was stronger. Before that, Muyang also added one more move to surely hunt down the doppelganger. Bei Sungmin. Master, did you call? From the darkness, Sungmin appeared. Muyang looked at the necklace on Sungmin's neck. I'll use the talisman. Talisman. And the last little wish left. If he combined the two, he would be able to make a true wish. A fierce power strong enough to even destroy a few Demon King legions. Would the doppelganger be able to withstand the curse of the vampire lord and wish at the same time? Others might say it would be a waste, but Muyang inwardly shook his head. He was ominous. And the reward wasn't given yet. It meant that everything would be settled when he was killed. If the doppelganger was that strong, he might receive a reward that was similar or even better than the wish. It meant that it was fully worth investing in. Even more. Your authority is mine. Unlike Anguish, the authority predator was still hungry. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. You bastard, what are you trying to do? Lucifer spoke for the first time. It was when he created a real wish, with the talisman and the little wish. That's the power of an archangel. How do you possess it? Wish is a power of an archangel? Lucifer was originally an angel. When he fell, he lost his holy powers. But he would be well aware of the angel's lineage better than anyone else. Give that strength to me instead. I'll cooperate with you. In an instant, Muyang could feel Lucifer's greed. However, he was reluctant to give it to him. A wish was holiness itself. If Lucifer was to absorb this, he might even be able to regain the godliness of his past. If that was to happen, Muyang's soul would quickly disappear. His words that he would cooperate were no more than sweet talk. An archangel's strength, he says. However, there was something that he gained from that expression of greed. If wish was truly that sort of strength, it seemed like he could wish for something more specific. Wish. What is your wish? As the winds blew gently, he was able to hear a voice he didn't know was a man's or a woman's. Soon the world changed. The moon was below and his surrounding was the universe. An unknown planet. Only Muyang dropped to that place. Stop. Are you going to use that precious thing? If you give it to me, I'll fully cooperate in killing him. Wouldn't that be better? Lucifer whispered. Yet Muyang didn't listen. Lucifer's strength was like a double-edged sword. A sword that could also head towards Muyang. The thing he needs to fully control Lucifer? That was, give me the strength of an archangel. You fool. Lucifer shrieked. The opportunity in front of him had disappeared. When you used the wish, you couldn't take it back. However, there was a limit to a wish and you could earn a better effect if you were more specific and close to what could be fulfilled. Or else, you might receive a random power that wasn't great. But through Lucifer's hint, Muyang was able to reach the greatest length of the wish. However, he didn't ask it on Lucifer. Only Muyang himself. The seventh archangel Gabriel's blessings are passed on to the user. Gabriel is the archangel of mercy, revenge, and death. Divine powers is created. You have inherited the Lord class, Archangel. It was a class of completely different tendency than those he had earned until now. But Muyang was able to have 4 classes of completely different tendencies. Although he never thought it was possible to gain one regarding divine powers. Maybe because of this there was no resistance. He had accepted the strength so naturally. Lord class, Archangel. Ah. Lucifer shuddered. It seemed like he never thought Muyang would ever gain Gabriel's strength. The powers of an archangel. And if it was the 7th archangel among them, the story was completely different. Although Lucifer was within the cherubim rank, the 7th archangel had the strength that surpassed simple rankings. Among them, Gabriel was an angel that wasn't that far behind Lucifer when compared. That power. If he could just have that power. Gabriel's divine powers were different from the general divine powers. He was an evil that was closer to a devil than a normal angel. However, he hadn't fallen. It was because he received the right to be so. If Lucifer was to gain that power, his fallen status would become nullified. Lucifer heightened his greed. However, as divine powers filled Muyang's soul, Lucifer was terrified. How could a human? Muyang's actions he had seen so far were quite strange, but it wasn't to this degree. If Muyang could fully control even an angel's powers, his potential would be beyond Lucifer's imaginations. He wanted to have it. That was originally his to have. However, Lucifer couldn't touch Muyang. If he was to touch him, he felt like he would get blown away as is. The fallen Lucifer was struck with fear in front of the holy archangel's powers. A power that even makes Lucifer afraid. Muyang nodded his head. If it is this powerful, he felt like he could destroy the doppelganger completely. He didn't use his strength to destroy an enemy once but made it into an infinite potential. And Muyang touched his forehead. His horns had increased to 4. What did this mean? Muyang had been able to raise at most 3 horns. Each allowed him to slow down time by double the speed, and this meant he was able to experience a world that was 8 times slower. However, the duration was overwhelmingly short. The world visible in Muyang's eyes was like that right now. 16 times. It's slow. Infinitely slow. In this slowed-down world, Muyang saw something else. A wiggle of life. The movement of nature. The flow of air and the inside of the wind. The problem was 5 seconds. Not 5 seconds of the original speed from what Muyang could feel. If he was to divide it by 16 in real time, it was only 0.3 seconds. However, the ability to stretch 0.3 seconds as 5 implied a lot of things. At least during the 5 seconds for Muyang or the 0.3 seconds in real time, there was no one who would win against Muyang. Not unless they were transcendental beings. Cough. Pua. Pua. Muyang quickly hit his horns. Although it was only for a moment, its impact was different. He felt like his eyes were going to pop out. His heart pounded so fast that it felt like it was going to shrink up. I can't use it often. Using all 4 horns was his last resort. He needed to hide it until the very end. A short period of time that even the enemy won't be able to recognize, as he needed to end everything within 0.3 seconds. Muyang took a deep breath in and shook his head. Status viewer. The status window was the best thing to confirm the changes with his eyes. There was nothing as eye-catching as objective numbers. Title dash. Darkness and Abyss. All stats plus 10. Achievement effect dash. There are 9 achievement effects. All stats plus 35, intelligence and wisdom plus 15, spirit ability plus 10. Class effect dash. Death Lord Lord class. Kingslayer Lord class. Archangel Lord class. Sets dash. Strength 485, 270 plus 215. Agility 477, 288 plus 189. Stamina 450, 280 plus 170. Intelligence 495, 240 plus 255. Wisdom 410, 275 plus 135. Fighting Aura 330, 170 plus 160. Magic Resistance 525, 125 plus 400. Spirit Ability 410, 260 plus 150. Evil Tendency 400, 320 plus 100. Divine Powers 300, 200 plus 100. Total level 475. Special note. Your pure stats have increased after absorbing weak amounts of Lucifer's strength. Completed the 4th metamorphosis. Equipped and invoked equipment. Anguish. All stats plus 15, strength plus 75, intelligence plus 45. Fighting Aura plus 30. 3 out of 12 zodiac stars set. All stats plus 30, magic resistance plus 140, spirit ability plus 40. Agility plus 50. Immortal King's Breastplate, strength plus 15, fighting aura plus 30, stamina plus 50, magic resistance plus 80. Hermes's Boots, agility plus 15. Skull Accessory, strength plus 19, agility plus 4. Greaves of Destruction, Baron, agility and stamina plus 20, intelligence plus 30. Wilderness Set, magic resistance plus 50, intelligence and wisdom plus 20. Starlight, Star of the Absolute, all abilities plus 10. Even at a glance, Muyang's development was extraordinary. However, his pure stats increased much more than when he fought Moon. Even if Anguish ate up Diablos, it was mere assisting stats. There was another reason for this sort of change in pure stats. I completed the 4th metamorphosis. Muyang's current pure stats were very far from the 4th metamorphosis. Then Muyang looked at the holy energy that formed on one of his hand. Perhaps the 4th metamorphosis took place when he used Wish. The body naturally evolved to accept the Archangel's divine powers. Even though he wasn't aware of it happening, the fact that he became stronger was a good thing. Through this, Muyang was able to be within the top 10 humans by looking at pure stats. Especially in terms of magic resistance, he was over 500. It was a figure that surpassed the top 10 and was near transcendental beings. Most skills weren't even ticklish anymore. Did they call something like this the equipment effect? Myung couldn't help but grin. He did gain a lot from his equipment. There wouldn't be any other person who would have been influenced by his equipment as much as Myung. Even the great Alexandra wouldn't be close to him. Well, the important thing in the end was how strong you were with everything. Even for the top 10 humans, if they didn't have that much strength due to their equipment, their level would have dropped drastically. I need to check the Archangel's skills as well. It was the new class he had earned. There were no fools who fought without checking information regarding themselves. Since it was a class he just earned, the main skills of the Lord class didn't get corrected automatically. It would probably be the lowest rank, but there wasn't anything wrong with checking it out. Myung turned his status viewer and the rest of the information popped out. Skill name: Gabriel's Wings. None. Explanation: 7th Archangel Gabriel's Wings is summoned. Gabriel's Wings has the power to regulate all justice. At most, 7,777 feathers can be thrown to strike the enemy. The destructiveness of the features is proportional to your divine powers. Skill name: Execution of Justice. None. Explanation: when you conduct mercy, revenge, or annihilate evil, your pure divine powers increase. This is only Gabriel's authority and you can never become fallen. Skill name: Divine Blessing. If equals, it's a blessing and a recovery skill that all archangels have. It is proportional to your divine powers and the speed and area of recovery changes. However, the power of this blessing is easily comparable to the authority of a Sage King. There were 3 skills he earned. However, one by one they were something out of the ordinary. For him to be able to summon even Gabriel's Wings, Myung used the skill. Then huge wings soared as it pierced through the skin of his back. Although there were only 2 wings that opened up completely, the size was greater than Myung's body. A subdued amount of divine powers mixed into the wings caused piety to shine even in Myung's eyes. Myung let out a smirk. For it to be an angel's wings. It was hard to believe that not anyone else but he received angel wings. Wasn't Myung a person who was least compared with the word angel? However, it was understandable. If it was some other angel and not Gabriel, Myung would have never earned these sort of wings. Execution of Justice. A power to never be fallen. This one justified Myung. Only after reading the skill explanation he was able to find out why Lucifer wanted it so badly. In the end, it meant that most of Myung's actions are acknowledged as justice. That kind of right was shared. The most valuable thing was this execution of justice. The divine blessing wasn't that far either. Healing ability that is comparable to a Sage King. As its level was low, he couldn't use it often and the area of effect was small. But Sage Kings are the only humans who could be a proxy of a god. You could consider saints as a god's apostles, but a proxy was a completely different feeling. Of course, the power of saintesses couldn't be compared to the power of one Sage King. The person who lived in the deepest parts of Mulan. Myung had never seen him before. He just had heard rumors. Since they said he rarely showed himself even when the demon gods invaded, he was clearly a person who was extremely cautious. Either way, if he was to act, they said even the demon kings would back away. That he had even the amazing ability to even bring back the dead. Fid said the skill was comparable to him. If I was a bit quicker. If he had the strength a bit faster, he might have saved Hyacinth. But he shook his head. After all, it was the result. If he couldn't earn Diablos, he wouldn't have been certain he would be able to kill the doppelganger and wouldn't have used Wish. There were regrets of what happened. However, he didn't regret his decision. Where are you? Through this, all his preparations were complete. Myung raised his head. The twilight sky indicated that the day was slowly ending. The doppelganger gained a face. The weak parts had been complemented. I'm still hungry. However, it was lacking. Even though his soul and body had been synced, the doppelganger wanted to gain much more information and strength. However, the doppelganger was still afraid of Muyang. He ate up people while avoiding Muyang's eyes. Their blood and souls became skin to the doppelganger. Crunch, crunch, chop chop. He even ate their bones up. He placed everything that made them human in his mouth. Delicious. Humans were a delicacy. Once you're addicted to it, you couldn't escape from it. The doppelganger became increasingly bold. Either way, most humans were weak. There weren't many who could stop him, and when he ate up a human, he quickly became stronger. He was also able to use their skills freely. If time passed like this, there would be fewer people who could match him. No, he felt that his fear against Muyang would also disappear. 10, 50, 100. As the number of people the doppelganger ate up increased, the doppelganger's strength also increased. The doppelganger didn't stop here. Even the spirits looked quite tasty. Ghosts and specters. Even the guardians of the ancient king. He was drawn to things that didn't have form. Even more, even the spirits didn't consider the doppelganger as their enemy. Hey! The spirits let out a scream. Their owner was eating them up. From the beginning, it was the Sky Devil and Alexandro that became the basis of his body. There was also a mixture of moon and devils. It meant that he could be involved in all material and spiritual things. It's a delicacy but still slightly lacking. As he ate up spirits, his body became bigger. However, compared to humans, they weren't as that tasty. Chup. The doppelganger smacked his lips. But humans were all united. There weren't many who went around alone. If he was to target humans, he needed to attack where they were gathered. And if he was to attack those places, there was a high chance that Muyang would show up. No. This is enough to beat him. I'll make him turn to ashes. The doppelganger looked down at his body. He was overflowing with strength. He felt like he could do anything. Thump, thump. The doppelganger moved as he snorted strongly. It wasn't like all of the humans were gathered at the arena. He attacked the smallest group first. But no one was able to stop the doppelganger. Kai ha ha ha. The doppelganger was excited. He even absorbed a few strong humans too. Now he truly felt that there was no one who could stop him. I'm the best. However, I'm still hungry. He wanted to consume even more humans. He saw the arena. If it was now, he wasn't going to lose to anyone. He's here. Close the door. Long-range attack. Magic division, prepare for the next attack. The humans didn't just continue to suffer. Only those who were thoroughly prepared were at the arena. However, even then they were unable to stop the doppelganger. No, they did land hits. His skin was pierced and his body parts were sliced off. However, the doppelganger's recovery ability was beyond one's imagination. Was he truly a monster? Someone shouted. A despairing voice. The doppelganger pierced through the door and started to slaughter. Pyong. Pierce. At that moment, wings came flying from the sky. Pyong. What was one feather gradually increased. Soon, thousands of feathers stabbed the doppelganger's whole body. I can barely recover? The doppelganger widened his eyes. The places the feathers struck, the recovery was very slow. This hadn't happened before. As he turned his head, he saw a familiar face. Oh, emissary. The sun's emissary has appeared. The humans cheered. Even the doppelganger knew him. You smell incredibly tasty. Gulp. For some reason, there was a scent that stimulated his appetite coming from Muyang. He wanted to eat him. Through whatever means, he needed to eat him. His instinct was calling out that if he was to eat him, he would become stronger, incomparable as to how he was now. Thump. The doppelganger jumped up. To eat Muyang. A wing made from bones pierced through his skin. Swoosh. But Muyang was expressionless. Afterwards, as he took out anguish while his wings were wide open, as strong dark-colored waves raged in his surroundings. Pray. A cry of rage. It was like a bell that signaled the beginning of the battle. However, the dark-colored wave wasn't simply just for appearance. It dampened the enemy's fighting will, made him frightened, and gave off all sorts of debuff effects. This ability, which strengthened depending on the fighting aura, was quite useful in battle. The doppelganger flinched. His fear regarding Muyang had grown larger once again. Muyang instantly broke it down into pieces and made it into dust the moment it was born. That fear was engraved in his instincts. He is young. Not the Sky Devil or Alexandro, but someone in the middle. A strong kid. That was Muyang's definition of the doppelganger. It was slightly odd. Alexandro Quintart. Was he just trying to make that? Everything is a variable. He wouldn't have guessed this result either. Muyang himself acted as a variable. Moon, the Sky Devil, and Alexandro couldn't flexibly act against him. Everyone bet their everything, and as a result they all faced different catastrophes. Even Alexandro wouldn't have known that a half Sky Devil would be completed. Furthermore, Moon's body was melted down at that place. Maharaga even interfered that a great chaos occurred. I'm going to kill. What a fool. The doppelganger clenched his teeth. He made a last-ditch effort to win against his fear of Muyang. Muyang carelessly raised his wings. From the wings that had a haze of light, feathers poured out again. A Lord class's skills can't be corrected. However, thankfully Gabriel's wings had no level. It meant that it was influenced a lot by Muyang's abilities. Although his divine powers were low, it acted like a poison against the doppelganger's body. Kayak. Thump. The doppelganger let out a horrible shriek as he swung his wings to attack Muyang. Thud. Rumble. Muyang was jammed onto the ground. However, as if nothing happened, he got up. I should refrain from air combat for a while. He wasn't used to air combat. Either way, where he was hit was quite burning, but it wasn't enough that he couldn't endure it. I'm strong. The doppelganger was triumphant. It was because he was successful in attacking Muyang and found out that his strength worked on him. It was a body that he grew after eating a few hundred humans and a few thousand spirits. Even Muyang couldn't stop him. Pray. 3 skills were shot at once. The power of fire, ice, and lightning. They were indiscriminately poured on top of Muyang like a hailstorm. Prank. Crackle. There was no end to the doppelganger's magical abilities. He continuously poured out skills to pressure Muyang. And everyone who watched the scene was worried. Oh, the emissary of the sun. Shouldn't we move to help him? Our attacks don't work on him. Didn't you see him instantly recovering from our attacks? But the attacks made by the emissary were recovered slowly. If we were to interfere, it would only be a bother. The Sun Guild's members were also known to be strong. In reality, they did land numerous hits onto the doppelganger. However, the problem was that he instantly recovered from them all. Sheet, the skills are pouring out endlessly. Let's try to stop that at least. But not everyone had the same opinion. There were people who acted thinking that Muyang would be able to move once the doppelganger stopped pouring out all those skills. Especially Kim Taehwan, who led that opinion. He stopped the skills that poured out as he held out the shield of eradication. Grr. Kim Taehwan invested everything on his stats and skills related to the shield. Even then, he was continuously pushed back by the doppelganger's attacks. People shot arrows and used skills to support from a distance. Those who were proficient with defense or used shields joined Taehwan. Those who had classes related to priests used their healing skills to support them. The doppelganger frowned. Food should die quietly. The doppelganger knitted his brows. He didn't like the fact that his prey was rebelling so much. However, the doppelganger continued to attack Muyang. It was because Muyang was the one that seemed the tastiest of them all. Gaiak! Taehwan screamed out loud. It wasn't just Taehwan. Hang on. Fuck. Whatever happens, we must protect. Until our emissary gets up, we must endure it. All defense was gradually being pierced through. The muscles in his arms were ruptured and the armor he was wearing was melting. He even had burns on his hands. It was obvious they weren't going to last long like that. It was at most 3. When the thick smoke was lifted, Muyang walked out. With a completely cold expression. He didn't seem to have received a lot of blows. Everyone was surprised. Even the doppelganger. However, most skills couldn't even scratch him as he had over 500 magic resistance. And there were probably 3 people who had over 500 magic resistance. And Muyang became one of them. However, more importantly, most skills used by the doppelganger were all in the middle. There is a limit to him as well. Muyang recalled. When the doppelganger mimicked him slowing down speed. Even then Muyang was still fast. He only had the world that slowed down 2 times at most. Also, he was only able to use 3 magic abilities at one time at most. Muyang was just overwhelmed by his appearance at first. He wasn't an all-rounder as he had thought. Swoosh! Anguish cried. The cry was incomparable to the past. Try to endure this as well. After finding out Muyang was fine, the doppelganger flinched. However, if the spells didn't work, he just needed to pour out stronger skills. A huge sphere of fire was made on top of the doppelganger's head. The sphere of fire was slowly increasing in size. It had the power to wipe out everything if it touched and exploded. Swallowing. Then the sphere of fire suddenly exploded. Muyang had moved. His horns increased to 2. 4 times. In his accelerated condition he saw the grains of the fire. And swung anguish. Swak. The sphere split exactly in half. And he ran as he spread his wings. He sliced the doppelganger's body diagonally. Zah. At the same time the curse of the vampire lord was inflicted. The vampire lord ate up smaller and weaker demons than itself. The doppelganger shrieked an eerie cry. He was fine when the humans attacked him numerously, but his body that was just sliced wasn't recovering like before. The curse of the vampire lord invaded and influenced the doppelganger's authority. It was a creepy sound. The doppelganger's body that was sliced in half staggered as if he was dancing. Soon an energy of purple light surrounded the doppelganger's whole body. The Sky Devil's power. Before he used Alexandro's skills, and now it seemed like he could also use the Sky Devil's powers. Then surprisingly the body started to regenerate. However, it wasn't a simple regeneration. The doppelganger became 2. The numbers continuously increased as he killed. That number now became 32. It seemed like he couldn't continuously proliferate but could only be made up of 32 bodies. All 32 bodies possessed the original powers of the doppelganger. At once 96 skills were poured out. Wilderness. Although he didn't receive a big damage, if the doppelganger poured out so ignorantly, it would be too much for Muyang to handle. Of course, even if he was to get injured, he just needed to recover. Unlike the past, Muyang now was able to recover on his own. Even if Muyang was in a dying situation, the divine blessing would allow him to recover at once. It was much better than the doppelganger's regeneration skill. In a day at most he could use it 3 times, but it meant that he could fight Whiteout Warrio with that much. But that didn't mean he could really fight endlessly. And so he activated a barrier. With the Star of the Absolute, the barrier shined and changed the surroundings into a different color. The Reality Marble Wilderness is activated. Through Anguish's effect, the wilderness is strengthened. The wilderness, like the word itself. The surroundings were all desert, devoid of civilization. Muyang had seen this scene somewhere. The Star of David. It was when he first arrived at the Blue Temple and found the Temple of Gremory. Muyang won over everything in this endless desert. In the past, his limits. This rough desert was a sort of a mirror. A place that showed their nature and tested them. Wow, what is this? This is my body. Get lost. Gwa. All the doppelgangers let out a scream. There were so many things mixed inside him. Everything gushed out at once and tormented him. Muyang won against it with his strong mentality. Would he be able to do the same? The main body used a teleport skill. Of course it didn't work. This was the wilderness. Inside Muyang's barrier there was no leaving. Without Muyang's permission you couldn't escape. Now I see your true nature. The doppelganger's nature was absolutely unsteady. Since he didn't have a nature in the first place, it would have been quickly made. After all, being placed in a situation like this, he couldn't help but feel a great deal of confusion. I won't forgive you. Never. The doppelganger started to rejoin again. The 32 bodies combined to make a huge giant. Because it was forcefully made, the body shook as if it could collapse at any moment. Like magma, his flesh popped and reattached continuously. But he couldn't be ignored. He felt the strengths of all those he ate up. It would be too much for even Muyang to receive his blows straight on. I just need to break this barrier. Plong. As his fists touched, the ground split. A huge explosion occurred and the force swept the surroundings. Muyang's horns increased to 3. Acceleration by 8 times. He quickly stepped and jumped on the debris of the ground that bounced up as it broke and instantly went near the doppelganger. Soon as he approached the doppelganger, his eyes were opened. The Sky Devil's eyes can see the future. The doppelganger caught Muyang's ankle. A reaction that couldn't be possible unless you know what was going to happen in advance. Crush, crush, crush. Muyang was shot down as he was. Every time he bounced off the ground, Muyang's body let out a scream. Cough. As he coughed up blood, Muyang stabbed the doppelganger's arm with anguish. The curse of the vampire was once again flown into his body. Quack. The doppelganger was surprised as if he was shocked by electricity and let go of Muyang. Muyang, who barely landed on the ground, spat out the blood that was in his mouth. The sturdiness of his equipment, his high stamina and his magic resistance. If any one of these were lacking, he would have died. Like this, the wilderness was a double-edged sword. While it could bring out the enemy's nature and everything about him and give him a trial, but in return, it made their fighting powers explode. But due to this, the curse worked more effectively. The curse of the vampire lord penetrated the doppelganger's body. The problem was those eyes. If he could read all my attacks. The speed of 16x was his last move. Only 5 seconds. In reality, 0.3 seconds. Within that time he needed to bet everything, and if he failed he would have to die. It was at that moment. You stupid B*TC. What are you doing inside me? Kaya hack. The doppelganger was confused. He scratched and smacked his own body and tried to drive something out of himself. You pray. It's useless to struggle. It was strange. Muyang used Dance of Death. His eyes were dyed black. And he saw Hyacinth. Hyacinth's presence was felt inside the doppelganger's body. Hyacinth played an important role in forming him. Muyang thought she disappeared completely, but she survived until the end at the very bottom. And through the wilderness, as the doppelganger's nature was maximized, she showed herself again. Hyacinth was harassing the doppelganger. The doppelganger's eyes started to shut little by little. Afterwards, both eyes were completely shut. 16 times. It was an opportunity. Muyang also changed. He raised all 4 horns. A world where he could even see the movements of the air. Muyang ran. Anguish butchered the doppelganger's body. 110-100. The doppelganger was continuously cut through. The doppelganger, who was combined unstably, couldn't even divide himself up again. The curse of the vampire lord and the strength of the archangel stopped his regeneration. Exactly when 0.3 seconds had passed in real time, the world turned back to normal. The doppelganger's movements stopped. And swish. His body crumbled and became dust.